Since the beginning of time, we've looked up at the night sky and felt something stir within us, a deep, almost primal wonder that connects every human across ages and cultures. Those glittering points of light weren't just distant suns to our ancestors. They were stories waiting to be told, mysteries yearning to be unraveled, and guides offering wisdom to those willing to listen. There's a reason ancient civilizations mapped the heavens with such care, charting the paths of planets and naming constellations that still capture our imagination today. That shared sense of awe is what we're tapping into as we journey back through history to explore 30 ancient tales of celestial wisdom. Stories that not only shaped the medieval understanding of the cosmos, but continue to echo in the ways we seek meaning and connection in our own lives. Picture yourself in a world without electric lights, where the darkness of night was not something to be banished but embraced, a vast, star-dusted canvas that invited contemplation and wonder. In that stillness, under a sky ablaze with stars, people didn't just see random specks of light. They saw patterns, myths, and divine messages etched into the very fabric of existence. These weren't mere legends, they were frameworks for understanding everything from the changing of seasons to the rise and fall of kingdoms. For medieval thinkers, scholars, and storytellers, celestial wisdom was both science and soul, a way to make sense of a mysterious universe while honoring traditions passed down through generations. And the most captivating part, many of these tales hold insights that still resonate, offering glimpses into how our forebears reconciled faith with observation, myth with meaning. What if I told you that some of history's most enduring stories aren't just fables but encoded wisdom narratives woven with astronomical knowledge, spiritual depth, and timeless truths about human nature? Over the course of this video, we'll uncover 30 of these remarkable tales, each one a testament to humanity's enduring quest for understanding. From the symbolic journeys of comets interpreted as divine omens to the intricate allegories linking zodiac signs with moral lessons, these stories reveal how medieval minds used the sky as both classroom and cathedral. You'll come away not just with a deeper appreciation for the past, but perhaps with a renewed sense of wonder every time you gaze upward. So settle in, open your mind, and let's embark on this journey together through time, through space, and through the stories that continue to light our way. Our journey into the celestial wisdom of the past begins not in the medieval period itself, but far earlier, with a story so ancient it was etched onto clay tablets in cuneiform script. The Epic of Gilgamesh, originating in Mesopotamia around 2100 before the Common Era, is humanity's oldest surviving great work of literature, and it pulses with cosmic significance that resonated for centuries. At its heart, this is a tale about a king's futile quest for immortality, a struggle against the very limits of human existence, and the heavens themselves are pulled into this drama in a breathtaking way. After the hero Gilgamesh rejects the romantic advances of the goddess Ishtar, her wounded pride summons a divine punishment from the sky, the celestial bull, a monstrous constellation of fury and power sent to ravage the kingdom of Uruk. This wasn't just a random monster, this was a being woven from the fabric of the cosmos. Medieval scholars, encountering this epic through fragments and retellings, saw profound layers of meaning in this celestial intervention. They interpreted the bull not merely as a plot device, but as a potent symbol of uncontrollable divine power and the catastrophic consequences of human hubris. In their meticulously illuminated manuscripts, they often depicted this event, showing the bull not as an earthly creature, but as a beast composed of stars and cosmic fire, its charge across the land mirroring the terrible, unpredictable path of a comet. For these thinkers, the story was a divine lesson written in the sky, a warning that challenging the natural order or the will of the gods would invite a ruin that fell from the heavens themselves. The bull's eventual slaying by Gilgamesh and his friend Enkidu was not seen as a simple victory, but a tragically heroic act that further severed their connection to the divine, setting the stage for the epic's deeper meditation on loss and mortality. This ancient tale, preserved and pondered over by medieval minds, illustrates a timeless truth that the sky was the original canvas upon which our deepest fears about power, pride, and our own impermanence were projected and understood. But from the fertile plains of Mesopotamia, our journey through celestial wisdom now carries us to the banks of the Nile, to a story that perfectly illustrates how the daily rhythm of the cosmos was seen as a divine, life-giving cycle. In ancient Egypt, the sun was not just a source of light and warmth. It was the god Ra, the supreme deity whose journey across the sky defined the very structure of existence. Egyptians believed that each day Ra piloted a magnificent solar barque, a shining vessel that carried the sun disk from dawn to dusk, but his journey did not end with sunset. The most perilous and spiritually significant part of his voyage occurred during the 12 hours of night, as he traveled through the treacherous, serpent-infested rivers of the underworld known as the Duat. This nightly passage was a cosmic battle against the forces of chaos, personified by the great serpent Apep, whom Ra had to defeat to be reborn at sunrise. This vivid narrative of death and rebirth, of a god navigating darkness to emerge victorious with the dawn, captivated the medieval imagination in a profound way. When fragments of Egyptian wisdom filtered into Europe through trade routes and translated texts, medieval alchemists did not see it as a foreign myth. They saw it as a powerful allegory for their own great work, the spiritual and physical process of transformation. The solar barque became a central symbol in their meticulously illustrated texts. In alchemical manuscripts, you often find intricate depictions of a ship sailing across a starry sea, its passenger not a pharaoh or a god, but a seeker of wisdom, an alchemist on a quest for the philosopher's stone. The 12 hours of Ra's nocturnal journey were reinterpreted as the 12 stages of the alchemical process, each hour representing a specific operation like calcination or fermentation, each one a necessary trial of purification on the path to achieving spiritual gold. The ultimate goal was not merely to create a physical substance, but to undergo an inner transmutation as dramatic as the sun's rebirth. The serpent Apep, the embodiment of chaos and primal darkness, was seen as the internal shadow self, the base instincts and impurities within the alchemist's own soul that had to be confronted and integrated. Just as Ra emerged from the Duat each morning, renewed and triumphant, the successful alchemist aimed to achieve a state of enlightenment, having unified their own inner opposites. This celestial metaphor provided a complete roadmap for the soul's journey, teaching that true transformation requires navigating through our own inner darkness, facing our personal demons, and trusting in the cyclical nature of spiritual growth. The enduring power of Ra's voyage lies in this universal truth, that after every period of struggle and dissolution comes the promise of renewal, a concept that offered hope and meaning far beyond the alchemist's laboratories and into the heart of the human experience. While the Epic of Gilgamesh and the Journey of Ra offered grand mythological frameworks, another civilization was meticulously documenting the heavens with a precision that would one day revolutionize medieval thought. In the 7th century before the Common Era, during the reign of King Amisajuka of Babylon, court astronomers carved observations onto a clay tablet that would become one of history's most significant scientific artifacts. This tablet, one of many in a series known as the Enuma Anu Enlil, did not tell a story of gods and monsters, but something perhaps even more captivating to the medieval mind. It charted with astonishing accuracy the complex cyclical movements of the planet Venus over a 21-year period. For the Babylonians, this was not merely astronomy, it was a direct line to the divine. They believed the fluctuating brightness, positions, and disappearances of Venus were messages from the goddess Ishtar, signaling impending fortune or disaster for the kingdom. The tablet meticulously pairs each celestial event with a specific omen, creating a predictive text of cosmic intention. Centuries later, this very tablet would resurface in a vastly different world. Through the intricate networks of trade and scholarship that connected the East and West, the Venus tablet of Amasajuka, along with other Babylonian astronomical records, found its way into the libraries of medieval Islamic scholars. They recognized its immense value, preserving, translating, and expanding upon its data. By the 12th and 13th centuries, these translated texts began filtering into European courts, carried by travelers and scholars along the Silk Road. The reception was nothing short of seismic. For medieval European astrologers who were still largely reliant on Greek texts, this ancient Babylonian data offered a predictive power that felt almost supernatural. It provided a proven mathematical pattern to the movements of what they called the morning and evening star, allowing them to make forecasts with a new level of confidence. The influence of this single artifact transformed astrological practice in the royal courts of Europe. Astrologers were no longer limited to general interpretations. They could now pinpoint the exact dates of Venus's transitions and retrograde motions, events long associated with shifts in fortune, love, and war. There are accounts from the court of Frederick II, Holy Roman Emperor, that detail how his court astrologers, using these refined Babylonian-derived cycles, predicted a period of intense political instability linked to a forthcoming retrograde of Venus. The prediction reportedly came to pass with the sudden outbreak of rebellions among his Italian city-states, an event that was seen not as coincidence but as stunning validation of this ancient celestial science. Similarly, in the French court, advisors to Louis IX are said to have counseled him against embarking on what would become his first crusade during a period Babylonian data marked as inauspicious for long journeys undertaken by leaders. His subsequent defeat and capture only served to solidify the authority of these methods in the medieval mind. The Venus tablet did more than just offer predictions. It provided a template for viewing history itself as cyclical, governed by repeatable celestial patterns. This idea that human affairs were tied to the clockwork of the cosmos, a concept so brilliantly demonstrated by the Babylonians, became a cornerstone of medieval political strategy and a testament to the enduring quest to find order in the chaos of life through the wisdom of the stars. Yet the enduring power of this legend is found not in its sorrow, but in its single, breathtaking moment of hope. For the Jade Emperor, moved by the couple's devotion and the magpie's plea, decreed that on the 7th night of the 7th lunar month, all the magpies in the world would fly up to the heavens. There they would form a bridge across the Silver River with their own wings, a shimmering, living causeway that would allow the weaver girl and the cowherd to reunite for a single night. This celestial bridge, known as the Magpie Bridge, became one of the most potent symbols of love and devotion across Asia, a promise that no separation is ever truly absolute if the bond is strong enough. Medieval astronomers and scholars, particularly those within the Islamic world and later in Europe who had access to translated Chinese celestial charts, were captivated by this story for a far more practical reason. They recognized it as a brilliant pedagogical device, an allegory woven into the stars to explain complex astronomical principles. The two stars, Vega and Altair, are vividly visible in the summer sky, and their positions relative to the Milky Way change predictably throughout the year. Medieval teachers used the lover's story to illustrate the concept of stellar motion and the shifting night sky. They would point out how, as the seasons progress from spring to summer, Vega and Altair appear to rise higher, moving closer to the zenith and thus metaphorically closer to their eventual reunion. The Milky Way itself, that shimmering river of stars, served as a fixed celestial landmark against which this apparent motion could be measured and understood. This myth found its way onto medieval celestial maps from Persia to Spain, often annotated in the margins of texts on astronomy. In these maps, the constellations of Lyra and Aquila were sometimes subtly anthropomorphized, with small illustrations of a weaving princess and a herdsman accompanying the stars. The story provided a human-scale narrative to an otherwise intimidatingly vast and mathematical cosmos. It taught an essential lesson that the heavens were not a cold, mechanical clockwork, but a domain where human emotions of love, loss, and hope were literally written in the stars. This fusion of deep myth and precise observation highlights a fundamental aspect of medieval celestial wisdom, the understanding that science and spirit are not opposing forces, but two languages describing the same magnificent, mysterious universe. The legend endures as a testament to the idea that our greatest stories are the ones that help us navigate not only the skies above, but the equally complex terrain of the human heart. Following the tender hope of the Magpie Bridge, we now turn to a story of cosmic upheaval and creation that stands in stark contrast. A grand, collaborative effort between gods and demons to wrest the secrets of immortality from the very fabric of the universe. From the ancient Vedic texts of India emerges the epic Samudra Manthan, the churning of the ocean of milk. This wasn't a battle but a temporary, uneasy alliance between the Devas, the gods of order, and the Asuras, the demons of chaos. Their goal was to obtain Amrita, the nectar of immortality, which lay hidden at the bottom of the cosmic ocean. To achieve this, they used the serpent king Vasuki as a churning rope and the massive Mount Mandara as their churning staff, wrapping the serpent around the mountain. The Devas held the tail end of the serpent while the Asuras gripped its head, and by pulling back and forth in a tremendous tug of war, they set the entire mountain spinning, churning the primordial waters. This violent, whirling motion did not simply produce a single elixir. It brought forth a series of extraordinary treasures and poisons from the depths, each one a fundamental force or aspect of creation. Before the Amrita finally emerged, the churning produced the lethal poison Halahala, which threatened to consume all of creation until Lord Shiva swallowed it to save the universe, holding it in his throat and turning it blue. It also brought forth the goddess of wine, the wish-fulfilling cow, the moon, and the divine physician with his healing herbs. The entire event was a metaphor for the turbulent process of creation itself, where both positive and negative elements must be brought forth and balanced to achieve a state of wholeness and immortality. For medieval Indian astronomers, this was far more than a captivating creation myth. It was a sophisticated cosmological model that provided the narrative framework for their precise mathematical calculations. They saw the churning not as a one-time event, but as an ongoing celestial process. The serpent Vasuki represented the ecliptic, the apparent path the sun travels across the sky throughout the year. The back and forth pulling of the gods and demons was interpreted as the oscillating, sinusoidal motion of the planets as they move along this ecliptic path, sometimes moving forward prograde motion, and sometimes appearing to move backward retrograde motion from our earthly perspective. Mount Mandara itself was seen as the central axis of the universe, a fixed point around which the entire cosmos spins. This mythological framework directly influenced the development of incredibly advanced mathematics. The great astronomer Aryabhata, in his seminal work the Aryabhatiya, written in the 5th century, described planetary motion using a concept called the Mandaphala, or the equation of the center. This was a complex mathematical correction factor used to calculate the true position of a planet based on its mean position. In essence, it accounted for the fact that planets do not orbit in perfect circles but in ellipses, causing their speed to vary. Medieval scholars explicitly linked this mathematical principle to the Samudra Manthan. The Mandaphala was visualized as the churning effect, the apparent uneven, oscillating motion of the planet caused by the divine and demonic forces pulling on the cosmic serpent. The larger the Mandaphala value for a planet, the more pronounced its retrograde loop, and the more dramatic its mythological churning was said to be. This connection between grand myth and precise calculation is a stunning example of how deeply intertwined science and spirituality were. The story provided a mental model, a way to visualize complex orbital mechanics centuries before the telescope. It allowed scholars to conceive of the universe not as a cold, empty void, but as a living, dynamic entity where physical laws were expressions of a deeper, divine narrative. The ultimate treasure, the Amrita, symbolized the supreme goal of this astronomical pursuit, not just data, but immortal wisdom, a perfect, timeless understanding of the cosmic order. This holistic view reminds us that our ancestors sought to explain the heavens not only with numbers but with stories that gave those numbers soul, meaning, and a place in the grand, churning ocean of existence. Leaving the ordered mathematical universe of Indian cosmology, we venture now into a far more primal and terrifying celestial drama, one born from the frozen landscapes and long winter nights of the Norse world. Here, the sky was not a placid ocean to be churned, but a chaotic, dangerous realm where the very sources of light and life were under constant threat. At the heart of this fear was a prophecy from the Völuspá, the ancient Norse poem of creation and doom, that the sun and moon, personified as the charioteers Sol and Mani, were locked in a desperate, eternal flight from two monstrous wolves. Skurll, whose name means treachery, relentlessly pursues the sun while his brother Hati, hatred, chases the moon across the sky. The belief was that one day, at the time of Ragnarök, the end of the world, these wolves would finally catch their prey, plunging the cosmos into an eternal darkness and heralding the destruction of the gods themselves. For medieval Scandinavians, this was not merely a story to be told around a fire. It was a working model of the cosmos that explained the most frightening celestial events they could witness. A solar eclipse was not an astronomical alignment. It was the moment when Skurll's jaws snapped shut, momentarily devouring the sun. The gradual darkening of the moon during a lunar eclipse was the shadow of Hati falling over his quarry, his breath hot on its heels. These events were omens of immense power and terror, interpreted by chieftains and seers as direct portents. A solar eclipse might be seen as a warning of a chieftain's impending death or a catastrophic defeat in battle, while a lunar eclipse could signal a coming famine or a particularly harsh winter. The myths provided a framework to understand these awe-inspiring events, transforming them from random occurrences into parts of a grand, if dreadful, narrative. Yet, fascinatingly, this same myth of cosmic predation also gave rise to some of the most sophisticated and practical navigation techniques of the medieval world. The Vikings, often portrayed as mere raiders, were in fact master mariners whose longship voyages across the treacherous North Atlantic to places like Iceland, Greenland, and even North America would have been impossible without an intimate understanding of the sky. Their celestial navigation was a brilliant fusion of myth, observation, and sheer necessity. They didn't see the sun and moon as impersonal balls of gas and rock. They saw them as Sol and Mani, beings whose predictable paths could be trusted precisely because they were running in a straight, desperate line from the wolves. This narrative reinforced the concept of a fixed celestial road. Viking navigators used the myth to create a mental map. They knew the sun's chariot, and by extension its path, was highest in the summer and lowest in the winter. To maintain a consistent westing towards Iceland or Greenland, a navigator would aim to keep the sun at a specific, memorized height above the horizon at its zenith, a technique known as sailing by the latitude. On overcast days or during the long twilight of the Arctic summer, they turned to the moon. Knowing the moon followed a similar path to the sun, they could use its position to maintain their course. The myth of Hati's pursuit provided a crucial mnemonic. Just as the wolf was always behind the moon, the navigator knew that certain guide stars, like the bright star known as Leiðarstjörna or guiding star, which we call Polaris, were always in a fixed position, waiting to guide them like a fixed point in the swirling celestial hunt. One remarkable example comes from the saga account of the discovery of Greenland. The navigator Gunnbjörn Ulfsson is said to have been blown off course during a particularly violent storm. When the clouds finally parted, he did not panic. Instead, he looked for the wolves. He observed the moon, noting that Hatti's shadow, the partial eclipse that was occurring, was beginning to recede from the bottom limb. In the mythos, this meant the moon was escaping for another night. Practically, it allowed him to accurately gauge the moon's altitude, and by comparing it to his mental almanac for that time of year, deduce his latitude. He realized the moon was lower in the sky than it should be for his intended course, indicating he had been driven far north. This celestial clue, interpreted through the lens of myth, allowed him to correct his course and eventually sight land, which he aptly named Gunnbjörn Skerries. This story exemplifies the Viking genius. They lived in a world animated by gods and monsters, yet they leveraged the predictable behaviors of those divine actors to achieve feats of exploration that border on the miraculous. Their celestial wisdom was a powerful reminder that sometimes the most terrifying stories can provide the most reliable maps. This celestial drama of hunter and prey written in the stars found a profound and practical application in the medieval world, far beyond the halls of scholars. For farmers, sailors, and travelers, the myth of Orion and Scorpius was not just a story. It was a crucial agricultural and navigational calendar. The very reason these two adversaries were placed on opposite sides of the sky, so they would never rise together, created a perfect, reliable clockwork in the heavens. Medieval peasants who might never see an illuminated manuscript knew the stars intimately. They observed that as the constellation of Scorpius began to ascend in the eastern sky in late spring, it signaled that the time for planting certain crops had passed. Its full prominence in the summer night marked the hottest part of the year. Conversely, the appearance of Orion dominating the winter heavens was a double-edged omen. Its brilliance provided much-needed light during the long, dark nights, but its arrival also signaled the onset of the coldest, harshest season, a time of scarcity where the myth of the hunter's boast felt like a warning against the hubris of believing one could ever truly conquer nature. This practical wisdom was meticulously formalized in medieval texts known as Mythology or agricultural calendars, which often featured detailed illustrations of Orion and Scorpius alongside instructions for seasonal tasks. A surviving English manuscript from the 13th century shows a farmer looking up at the distinct pattern of Orion's belt, with the text below advising, "When the hunter's 3 stars shine bright at midnight, spare the seed, for the frost will bite." The myth provided an unforgettable mnemonic for this vital timing. You didn't need to read Latin or own a calendar. You simply needed to look up and remember the story. If the scorpion was high, it was time for summer harvest. If the hunter was dominant, winter was coming. This integration of myth into daily survival highlights the deepest layer of medieval celestial wisdom. The stars were a living library, a divine narrative etched across the cosmos that provided guidance, warning, and meaning to every aspect of human life, from the king in his castle to the peasant in his field. Far from the frozen Norse realms, in the humid jungles of Mesoamerica, an entirely different kind of celestial drama unfolded, one that saw the stars not as hunters or prey, but as the final, glorious reward for heroes who had triumphed over the ultimate darkness. The Mayan epic, the Popol Vuh, tells the story of the hero twins, Hunahpu and Xbalanque, and their daring descent into the terrifying 9-level underworld of Xibalba. Their quest was not one of simple exploration. It was a challenge issued by the arrogant lords of death, who had lured them there to be humiliated and destroyed in a series of deadly ball games and trials within dark houses of torment. Through incredible cunning, magical transformations, and sheer bravery, the twins outwitted every trap, ultimately defeating the lords and achieving immortality. Their final act of resurrection saw them ascend into the heavens, where they became the most fundamental pillars of the Mayan cosmos. Hunahpu transformed into the sun, and Xbalanque into the moon, eternal symbols of life, death, and cyclical renewal. For the medieval Mayan priests observing the skies from the summits of pyramidal temples, this was far more than a sacred origin story. It was the foundational narrative that directly informed their world-renowned astronomical precision. They saw the daily journey of the sun and moon not as impersonal orbital mechanics, but as the continuous, victorious procession of the hero twins across the sky. This theological framework provided the urgent motivation for their meticulous observations. To track the celestial bodies was to honor the gods and understand their divine will. The twins' victory in Xibalba was reenacted every single day as the sun conquered the night and the moon illuminated the darkness, and it was the priest's sacred duty to monitor this eternal cycle with flawless accuracy. This deep mythological belief fueled the development of some of the most sophisticated mathematics in the ancient world. The Mayan long count calendar, a complex and interlocking system of cycles, was their tool for mapping this divine drama onto time itself. Their solar year, the Hub, was calculated to an astonishing 365.2420 days, a figure even more precise than the Gregorian calendar used in Europe at the time. This allowed them to predict solstices and equinoxes with pinpoint accuracy, events seen as moments of supreme balance between the powers of the upper world and the vanquished underworld. But their most breathtaking calculations involved the planet Venus. The Mayans documented its 584-day synodic cycle, the time it takes to return to the same position relative to the Sun as seen from Earth, with such exactitude that their prediction tables in the Dresden Codex show an error of just 1 day every 500 years. These predictions were not academic exercises, they were vital to the state religion and warfare. Venus, associated with the god Kukulkan, was believed to exert a powerful, often malevolent influence. Its first appearance as the morning star after a period of invisibility was interpreted as the moment Kukulkan dipped his spear into the world, heralding a time of conflict. Using their codices, priests could predict these apparitions years, even decades in advance. Historical records from the city of Decode describe a series of military campaigns launched in the 8th century that were meticulously timed to coincide with these precise celestial events. The strategy was to harness the perceived divine fury of the war god, launching attacks just as Venus rose, believing it would sow panic among their enemies and ensure victory. The success of these Venus-timed campaigns reinforced the authority of the priestly astronomers and the sacred truth of the Popol Vuh narrative, weaving astronomy, mythology, and power into an inseparable whole. The legacy of the hero twins endures as a powerful testament to the human drive to find order and meaning in the cosmos, proving that the most enduring stories are those written not just in books, but in the very motion of the heavens themselves. While many cultures focused on the brilliant stars themselves, indigenous Australians looked into the profound darkness between them and saw a story of profound connection to the land. Across the continent, Aboriginal peoples share a celestial narrative from the Dreamtime, the eternal era of creation, that centers not on a constellation of stars, but on a vast, dark nebula within the Milky Way. This formation is known as the emu in the sky. To see it, you must shift your perception away from the points of light and instead trace the silhouette formed by the dark clouds of interstellar dust that blot out the starlight behind them. This creates the unmistakable shape of a giant emu with a rounded body, a long neck, and a distinct head stretching across the night sky. This was not a casual observation. It was a sophisticated cosmological map that linked the heavens directly to the rhythms of life on Earth. The genius of this celestial knowledge lay in its dynamic interpretation. The emu was not static. Its position and posture in the sky changed throughout the year, and each change carried a specific, vital meaning. When the emu appeared to be standing upright in the early evening sky during the autumn months around April and May, it was interpreted as a male emu sitting on his nest incubating the eggs. This was a critical signal for communities across Australia. It meant that the real terrestrial emus were currently nesting and that their eggs, a highly prized and nutritious food source, were not yet ready to be gathered. The celestial map was providing a clear conservation guideline. Wait. Then, as the Earth's orbit progressed, the emu's apparent position would shift. Later in the year, the dark nebula would appear to stretch horizontally along the horizon, as if the celestial emu was now running. This signaled that the incubation period was over, the eggs had hatched, and that the season for gathering emu eggs had officially begun. This wasn't mere folklore, it was a precise, environmentally sustainable calendar system encoded in the very fabric of the galaxy. This deep astronomical understanding was matched by equally advanced techniques for land navigation, techniques that medieval European explorers would have found bewilderingly effective. Aboriginal navigators used a complex mental map of the night sky that functioned like a celestial compass. They didn't just recognize individual constellations, they understood the precise celestial pathways between them. For instance, the pointers, the two bright stars of Alpha and Beta Centauri, were not just used to find the Southern Cross. They were seen as two brothers who always indicated a specific direction. A navigator traveling at night would memorize the position of these brothers relative to a particular landmark at a specific time, knowing that hours later, their new position would still indicate the correct bearing. One documented example comes from the practices of the Torres Strait Islanders, master mariners who undertook long, open ocean voyages between islands in outrigger canoes. Their navigation relied on a star compass of immense complexity. They had names for over 200 stars and knew the exact point on the horizon where each one would rise and set throughout the year. To sail from Mer Island to Doar Island, a journey of over 60 kilometers across open sea, a navigator would set his course by aligning the prow of his canoe with the rising point of a specific star, say the star known as Usul in the Pleiades cluster. He would then maintain that bearing by continuously observing the succession of stars rising from that same point on the horizon as the night progressed, all while mentally compensating for the canoe's movement. This technique, known as star path navigation, required an encyclopedic knowledge of the sky and an ability to perform complex mental calculations of time and direction without any instruments whatsoever. It was a form of celestial dead reckoning that rivaled, and in some way surpassed, the methods used by European and Polynesian navigators during the same period. The emu in the sky stands as a powerful testament to a different way of knowing, one that teaches us that true wisdom often lies not in the obvious points of light, but in the profound and meaningful spaces in between. In the Fertile Crescent of ancient Persia, a different kind of celestial journey captured the imagination of scholars and storytellers, one that was not forced by desperation or granted as a reward, but was instead a symbol of supreme earthly authority granted by divine favor. The legendary King Jamshid, a central figure in the Shahnameh, the epic book of kings, was said to possess a magnificent flying throne, a celestial chariot that could carry him across the heavens. This was not merely a vehicle for travel, it was the ultimate symbol of his far or divine glory, a luminous mandate that legitimized his rule and connected him directly to the cosmic order. Poets describe the throne as a dazzling platform, sometimes pulled by magical birds or demons, upon which Jamshid would ascend to survey his entire kingdom in a single day, dispensing justice and wisdom from the sky itself. This powerful image of a ruler navigating the firmament became deeply embedded in Persian culture, representing the ideal of a monarch so enlightened he could literally operate on a higher plane. Centuries later, as the Islamic Golden Age dawned, this potent myth did not fade into obscurity. Instead, it was rediscovered and re-engineered by brilliant astronomers in great learning centers like Baghdad and Isfahan. For these medieval scholars, Jamshid's throne was not a fairy tale. It was a compelling allegory for humanity's potential to understand and map the cosmos. They saw the king's aerial survey of his domain as a metaphor for the scientific quest to chart the heavens, to comprehend the grand design of creation from a privileged God's eye view. This narrative ambition directly fueled one of the most important technological innovations of the medieval period, the refinement of the astrolabe. This intricate brass device, often called the mathematical jewel, was essentially a portable, functional model of the universe, and its development was driven by the same desire that propelled Jamshid's mythic flight, to hold the cosmos in one's hands. The most direct technological inspiration drawn from the tale was the astrolabe's central component, known as the rete. This was a complex, web-like cutaway plate that represented the fixed stars and the ecliptic path of the sun. To its Persian designers, the rete was not just a scientific tool, it was a symbolic recreation of Jamshid's flying throne itself. The throne's platform was reimagined as the mater, the main body of the astrolabe which held the latitude-specific plates. The throne's mythical bearers, the birds or demons, were conceptually transformed into the instrument's precise pin and horse, the pivoting components that allowed the rete to rotate smoothly over the plates, mimicking the apparent daily rotation of the stars around the Earth. Using the astrolabe, an astronomer could, in a very real sense, replicate the king's journey. By aligning the rete with the current time, they could fly above the celestial sphere, seeing which stars were rising and setting, and determining the positions of heavenly bodies just as Jamshid surveyed the lands below him. This fusion of myth and engineering led to breathtaking advancements. The 9th century Persian astronomer Muhammad al-Fazari is credited with crafting one of the first astrolabes in the Islamic world, and his work was steeped in this cultural context. Later, the brilliant scholar Abd al-Rahman al-Sufi, in his seminal book of fixed stars, didn't just list celestial coordinates. He provided detailed instructions on how to engrave the rete with star positions, explicitly comparing the process to setting jewels into the crown of a king, a clear echo of Jamshid's glorious reign. The astrolabe's ability to solve a vast array of problems, telling time, calculating prayer schedules, finding the direction to Mecca, and even surveying land, meant that the user was, in effect, performing multiple acts of kingship through celestial wisdom. The myth provided the imaginative spark, and the scientists provided the mathematics, but together they created an instrument that democratized celestial authority. No longer was surveying the cosmos the privilege of a mythical king with a divine chariot. Any skilled individual with an astrolabe could now hold a model of the universe in their palms, achieving a level of understanding that would have seemed like magic to previous generations. This story beautifully illustrates how a timeless legend of power and ascent can evolve into a tangible tool for discovery, bridging the gap between the desire to reach the heavens and the intellectual means to actually map them. Across the Irish Sea, the Celtic world held a different vision of divine power, one that blazed across the sky not in a chariot, but as a weapon of pure, unstoppable solar energy. The god Lug Lamfata, whose name means lug of the long arm, was a master of all arts and a deity of light, and his most potent symbol was a spear that burned with an inextinguishable fire. This was not a simple weapon for battle, it was a cosmic force. Irish myths describe it as so voracious and alive that it had to be kept sedated in a vat of poppy seeds when not in use, lest its raging flame consume the world. When Lug wielded it in combat, its cry was said to be as thunder, and its light could blind armies, representing the overwhelming, focused power of the sun at its zenith. For the ancient Celts, Lug's spear was the very embodiment of the sun's life-giving yet destructive potential, a celestial tool that could both foster growth and bring utter ruin. This potent pagan symbol faced near certain oblivion with the arrival of Christianity, but instead of being erased, it was astonishingly preserved and transformed by a most unexpected group, medieval Irish monks. In the scriptoria of remote monasteries like Iona and Kells, these devout scribes dedicated to a new faith made the conscious decision to copy and illuminate the old stories. They recognized the profound cultural and symbolic power within them, and in texts like the Liber Gabala Iren, the Book of Invasions, they meticulously wrote down the legends of Lug and his fiery spear. Their genius, however, lay in translation not of language but of symbolism. They began the delicate work of reframing this potent solar imagery to serve a new Christian cosmology, hiding celestial wisdom in plain sight within the most sacred of objects, their illuminated manuscripts. The most breathtaking example of this is found in the Book of Kells itself, particularly in the intricate carpet pages that precede the Gospels. To the casual observer, these pages are a glorious chaos of spirals, knots, and interlacing patterns. But a closer look, informed by the old myths, reveals a hidden language. The monks often used a specific, recurring motif, a long, sharp, diamond-shaped pattern that repeatedly pierces through the complex weave of circular knots. This form is a direct visual echo of Lug's spear transfixing the cosmos. The circular knots represent the eternal, interconnected nature of God's creation, and the piercing diamond shape, often colored in vibrant yellows, reds, and oranges, becomes a Christianized symbol of divine light breaking into the world. It is no longer Lug's spear, but the illuminating power of the Holy Spirit, or the light of Christ piercing the darkness of sin. This was celestial wisdom repurposed, a way to convey the concept of divine intervention using a visual vocabulary their culture already understood on a deep, subconscious level. This symbolic translation extends to specific folios. On the page illustrating the Gospel of Matthew, a particularly ornate initial letter might feature a dominant spear-like shaft that seems to radiate light, banishing demonic faces woven into the background knotwork. The monks were visually depicting the triumph of divine light over chaos, a concept every bit as celestial as the original myth. They understood that the human mind responds to powerful symbols, and the image of a piercing, radiant force was far more effective than words alone for conveying the idea of heavenly power entering the earthly realm. By baptizing Lug's spear into their art, these medieval monks achieved something remarkable. They did not destroy the old wisdom, they gave it a new and enduring life, ensuring that the ancient Celtic understanding of the sun's power would continue to shine forth from the vellum pages, a testament to the enduring human need to find the celestial encoded in everything, from the wielded weapon of a god to the sacred text of a new faith. In the realm of celestial visitors, few tales are as poignant and exquisitely crafted as the Japanese story of the bamboo cutter. In this 10th century narrative, a humble bamboo cutter discovers a tiny, radiant girl inside a glowing stalk. He and his wife raise her as their own, naming her Kaguya Hime, the Shining Princess. She grows into a woman of unearthly beauty, attracting proposals from the most powerful nobles in the land, yet she rebuffs them all with impossible tasks. The story's true heart, however, is its celestial reveal. Kaguya Hime is not of this earth. She is a being from the moon, sent to our world as a refuge during a celestial war, and eventually, a delegation of moon beings descends in a luminous vessel to reclaim her, forcing her to return to her true home and leaving her earthly parents heartbroken. This story, known as the Tale of the Bamboo Cutter or Taketori Monogatari, transcended mere folklore in medieval Japan. It became a profound cultural and spiritual lens through which the moon itself was perceived. For Heian period courtiers and the medieval monks who followed, the moon was no longer a cold, distant rock. It was Kaguya Hime's home, a perfect, pure, and unattainable realm of tranquility and immortality. This poetic personification deeply influenced the aesthetic principle of mono, the awareness of the poignant beauty of impermanence. The moon's cyclical phases were seen as a reflection of Kaguya Hime's own story, a beautiful, fleeting presence that waxes to full brilliance only to inevitably wane and disappear, reminding viewers of the transient nature of all beautiful things in the mortal world. This rich mythological framework provided the emotional and philosophical impetus for some of the most meticulous lunar observations of the medieval era. If the moon was a realm worthy of a being as perfect as the shining princess, then understanding its motions was a sacred duty. Medieval Japanese calendar makers, known as rikijatsushi, operated within a unique system that blended Chinese-derived astronomical mathematics with native Shinto cosmology and Buddhist conceptions of the cosmos. Their task was to create lunisolar calendars that harmonized the solar year with the lunar months, and the myth of Kaguya-hime directly influenced this work by elevating the moon's status to something worthy of intense devotional study. This synthesis of myth and math is spectacularly evident in a 12th century document known as the Kuchizusame, an illustrated encyclopedia used for educating the aristocracy. Alongside entries on poetry and etiquette, it contains detailed lunar charts. These are not dry scientific diagrams, they are artistic renderings that often depict the moon's surface not with craters, but with the silhouette of a rabbit pounding mochi, an image inextricably linked to the bamboo cutter tale through associated folklore. The charts meticulously track the moon's phases, but the annotations reveal the blended worldview. The calculations for the length of the synodic month are precise, but the text might poetically refer to the new moon as the time of the princess's sorrow, and the full moon as the radiance of her unveiled court. The most significant practical application of this was in the development of the Jokyo calendar, commissioned by the Tokugawa shogunate in the 17th century but built upon centuries of prior medieval work. The lead astronomer, Shibukawa Shunkai, and his predecessors were tasked with correcting accumulated errors in the lunar calendar. Their calculations for determining intercalary months, the extra months added periodically to keep the lunar and solar years in sync, were a feat of mathematics. Yet the official edicts and public explanations for these adjustments often leaned on the mythology to make the complex science intelligible and acceptable to the population. A change in the calendar might be announced with the explanation that the moon's journey was out of step with the celestial procession for the lady's return, and that the correction was necessary to restore harmony to the path between the realms. The myth provided a narrative necessity for precision, turning an abstract astronomical problem into a matter of maintaining a cosmic connection to a beloved celestial being. The enduring legacy of Princess Kaguya is this perfect marriage of story and science, reminding us that the most accurate maps of the heavens are sometimes drawn not just with numbers, but with a heart full of wonder. While many cultures envisioned a single creation event, the Aztecs saw existence as a series of brutal cycles, each with its own sun, each ending in catastrophic dissolution. This was the legend of the Five Suns, a grand cosmological narrative where the very stability of the world was purchased through sacrifice. According to their myths, the gods had created and destroyed 4 previous worlds, or suns, each named for the elemental force that ended it. The son of earth destroyed by jaguars, the son of wind ripped away by hurricanes, the son of fire rain consumed by volcanic fire, and the son of water obliterated by a global flood. The current and fragile era was the 5th sun, the sun of movement, created at the ancient city of Teotihuacan when the humble and diseased god Nanahuatzin courageously leapt into a divine bonfire to become the new sun. But his light would not move across the sky without a terrible price. The other gods had to offer their own lifeblood, their hearts, to set him on his daily journey. This foundational act established the core Aztec belief that the cosmos operated on a principle of reciprocal energy exchange. The sun required a continual offering of the most precious substance, human life, to fuel its movement and stave off a final, eternal collapse into darkness. This wasn't a remote theological concept, it was the absolute bedrock of the Aztec state, and its entire ceremonial life was structured around a complex calendar system designed to measure and appease this cosmic debt. The Aztecs used 2 interlocking calendars. The first was the Zupohualli, or the year count, a 365-day solar calendar divided into 18 months of 20 days each, with 5 ominous, nameless days at the end. This calendar governed agricultural and civic life, but it was intertwined with the second, far more spiritually significant calendar, the tonal pohuale, or the day count. This was a 260-day sacred almanac composed of 20 trecina periods, each 13 days long. Every single day in this cycle was governed by a unique combination of one of 20-day signs and a number from 1 to 13, each combination carrying a specific fate or quality, much like a birth chart. The true power and the true terror came from the conjunction of these two cycles. Every 52 years, the two calendars would complete a full cycle and realign. This period, known as the New Fire Ceremony, was the most critical moment in Aztec life. They believed that if the rituals failed at this precise celestial juncture, the fifth sun would end, and the stars would become monstrous Tzitzimime demons that would descend to devour all of humanity. The role of the priestly astronomers, therefore, was one of supreme importance. They were the timekeepers of the apocalypse, and their observations determined the exact moments for the state's most vital function, the offering of tonali or life force to the sun. Their primary tool was a carefully calibrated system of architectural alignments. The Templo Mayor in the capital city of Tenochtitlan was not just a pyramid, it was a massive celestial observatory. Its twin temples, dedicated to the rain god Tlaloc and the sun god Huitzilopochtli, were precisely oriented so that on the spring equinox, the rising sun would appear directly between them, an event that signaled the beginning of the season of warfare and sacrifice, known as the Flowery Wars, which were fought specifically to capture victims for the gods. A specific and chilling example of this celestial scheduling is found in the festival of Tlacaxipuyalistli, held in the second month of the solar calendar to honor Zip Totuk, the god of renewal and the flayed skin. The priests would use the tonal pohuale to identify days under the auspice of the day sign Cuautli Eagle, which was associated with the sun and warrior sacrifice. When such a day coincided with the zenith passage of the sun, the moment it reached its highest point in the sky with no shadow, it was deemed the most potent time for the ritual. Captured warriors would be tethered to a large circular stone called the Temelacatl and forced to do battle against elite Aztec jaguar and eagle warriors. This was no fair fight. It was a symbolic reenactment of the sun's daily victory over the stars. The captives, representing the celestial warriors of the night, were ritually defeated. Their hearts were then offered to the sun at its zenith, the point of its maximum strength, in the belief that this life force would directly strengthen Huitzilopochtli for his ongoing battle against the darkness. The body would often be flayed, and a priest would wear the skin, symbolizing the new layer of growth that comes after harvest, a direct connection between celestial timing, sacrificial energy, and agricultural renewal. This was the Aztec cosmos in practice, a deeply interlinked system where the movement of the sun dictated the calendar dictated the ritual, and the ritual of sacrifice was the essential fuel that kept the entire universe and the very sun itself in motion. From the Aztec world of cyclical sacrifice, we journey back to the very cradle of civilization, to a story that laid the foundational blueprint for one of the most enduring concepts in celestial magic, the sevenfold planetary ladder of the soul. In ancient Sumer, the poem known as Inanna's Descent to the Underworld recounts the harrowing journey of the goddess of love, fertility, and war as she ventures into the domain of her sister, the dreaded Queen Ereshkigal. To reach the throne room of the underworld, Inanna must pass through 7 gates, and at each one, the gatekeeper demands she relinquish a piece of her royal attire, her crown, her lapis lazuli beads, her breastplate, and finally her very robe, until she stands naked and powerless before her sister, who immediately strikes her dead and hangs her corpse on a hook. This stripping away was not merely a random humiliation. It was a profound allegory for the soul's descent into the underworld, shedding the layers of its worldly identity to confront the raw, naked truth of mortality. For the Sumerians, these 7 gates were deeply intertwined with their celestial observations. Each gate was symbolically linked to one of the 7 moving celestial bodies they could observe with the naked eye: the Sun, the Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. Inanna's journey downward was seen as a reverse astrological process, moving away from the ordered, predictable heavens and into the chaotic, unseen realm below, losing the planetary influences that governed her divine power with each step. Her subsequent resurrection, negotiated by her vizier who bargains with the gods, completes the cycle, representing the soul's triumphant return, now reborn with deeper wisdom. This story of death and return through 7 celestial stages captivated the medieval imagination for over a millennium, but it was interpreted not as a myth to be read, but as a practical manual for healing and magic. When this Mesopotamian wisdom filtered into medieval Europe through translated Arabic texts, it found fertile ground in the practices of astrological medicine. Medieval physicians and mages saw Inanna's descent not as a story, but as a precise map of how planetary energies could influence the human body for both ill and good. They believed that just as Inanna lost her attributes at each gate, a person suffering from an ailment was under the negative influence of a specific planet, and to cure them, one had to navigate this celestial ladder in reverse, using the counterbalancing power of the corresponding planetary metal or talisman. This system became the cornerstone of a complex medical practice. A text known as the Picatrix, a grimoire of astrological magic translated from Arabic into Latin in the 13th century, provides explicit instructions on this very practice. It details how to create talismans at specific planetary hours, using the metal associated with each celestial body to draw down its power for healing. For instance, a patient suffering from a raging fever, which was attributed to the excessive heat and anger of Mars, would be treated with a talisman made of Iron Mars's metal. But the ritual was far more complex than simply wearing a piece of metal. The physician, acting as a celestial navigator, would first identify the planetary imbalance through the patient's astrological chart. To counteract Mars, they would invoke the opposing influence of Venus. The ceremony had to be performed on a Friday, Venus's day, during the planetary hour of Venus, and the iron talisman might be engraved with the symbol of Venus or a pacifying image. The physician might even use a specific chant or invocation that essentially retraced Inanna's journey upward, calling upon the goddess's returned power to restore balance. This was seen as a symbolic resurrection of the patient's health, mirroring Inanna's own return to life. This celestial wisdom was incorporated into mainstream medieval medical practice through texts like the Lapidarius of Marbode of Rennes, which detailed the healing properties of stones tied to the 7 planets, and the vast volumes of the Hortus Sanitatis, which blended herbal lore with astrological correspondences. A remedy for a melancholy patient suffering under Saturn's cold, depressive influence might involve the herb nightshade associated with Saturn, but it would be administered on a Saturday and perhaps while the patient held a piece of lead, Saturn's metal, to ground the negative energy. The entire practice was a direct, practical application of Inanna's mythic journey, transforming an ancient story of death and rebirth into a sophisticated system for understanding the human body as a microcosm of the celestial order, where healing was a form of astral navigation. Across the vast woodlands of North America, the Iroquois people, or Haudenosaunee, looked to the autumn sky and saw a story of relentless pursuit that dictated the very rhythm of their lives. The constellation we know as Ursa Major, the Great Bear, was not a solitary figure to them. It was the central character in a dramatic celestial hunt. Their legend tells of 3 hunters represented by the stars that form the handle of our Big Dipper, eternally chasing the bear through the heavens. Each autumn, as the constellation dipped lowest in the northwestern sky, the hunters were said to finally catch up to their quarry, wounding it. The blood of the celestial bear would then spill down to earth, painting the leaves of the maple, oak, and sumac with brilliant shades of crimson and orange. This vivid annual event was far more than a poetic explanation for the fall colors. It was a critical, practical signal deeply embedded in their survival strategy, a celestial calendar marking a period of urgent preparation for the harsh winter to come. This celestial narrative directly governed the Iroquois agricultural cycle with remarkable precision. The appearance of the Great Bear low in the evening sky, with the hunters closing in, signaled that the time for harvesting the vital three sisters, corn, beans, and squash, was at its absolute peak. The Iroquois understood that after the first frost, which often coincided with this celestial event, any remaining crops would be ruined. The legend provided an unmissable, large-scale clock in the sky that every member of the community could observe and understand. Elders would point to the position of the bear, noting how its back seemed to brush the horizon, and would initiate the final communal harvest. This was also the signal to begin gathering and storing other crucial resources for winter. The nuts from black walnut and hickory trees were collected in great quantities, and the late ripening fruits like persimmons were harvested for drying. The story of the hunt was a mnemonic device of immense power, ensuring that no one would forget the critical timing of these tasks. Furthermore, this celestial marker was inextricably linked to their migratory patterns. The Iroquois were not nomadic in the constant sense, but they practiced a form of seasonal transhumance, moving between larger, fortified winter villages and more dispersed summer hunting and fishing camps. The wounding of the Great Bear was the definitive sign that it was time to begin the journey back to the protected winter longhouses. The timing of this migration was a matter of life and death. Leaving the summer camps too early could mean missing out on late-season resources, but leaving too late risked being caught in early snowstorms while on the move. The position of the constellation provided a reliable, consistent deadline that was visible for all to see, unaffected by unpredictable early weather patterns. It was a shared, celestial agreement that the entire community could trust. The techniques for observing this celestial event were sophisticated and passed down through generations with meticulous care. This was not a casual glance at the sky, it was a precise form of horizon astronomy. Knowledge keepers would use fixed landmarks in the local topography, a specific notch between two hills, a distinctively shaped peak, or a particular tall tree as their reference points. They would note the exact spot on the horizon where the brightest star of the bear's body, Dub, would set each evening. Over the weeks, they would track its gradual descent. When Dub set directly into or just above that specific landmark, it marked the night of the bear's wounding. This method of using a horizon calendar allowed for astonishing accuracy in predicting the change of seasons, often within a day or two year after year. One specific and beautifully documented example of this practice comes from the oral histories of the Seneca Nation, recorded by early ethnographers. In one account, a clan mother is described as having the responsibility of watching from a particular flat rock near the riverbank each evening. Her designated landmark was the cleft of a distant mountain known as Bear Mountain. When the star we call Alcade, the last star in the hunter's belt, appeared to dip into that cleft just after sunset, she would announce to the entire village that the hunters had thrown their spear. This was the signal to commence the final phase of the nut harvest and to begin packing for the move within the next 7 days. This practice showcases a decentralized and community-based scientific tradition where celestial knowledge was not hoarded by an elite priesthood, but was a practical tool managed within families and clans, ensuring the entire community's resilience. The legacy of the Great Bear Hunt endures as a profound example of how a rich celestial narrative can provide not just meaning, but a precise and sustainable guide for living in harmony with the Earth's cycles. High atop the Tibetan plateau, where the sky feels near enough to touch, A different kind of celestial wisdom took root, one that saw the entire universe as a vast, sacred architecture centered around a single, unimaginable peak. This is the legend of Mount Meru, known in Tibetan as Rai Rab. In Buddhist cosmology, Meru is not a mountain of stone and snow that one could climb. It is the axis of all existence, a colossal pillar of gold and jewels that stands at the very heart of the universe. The continents of the human world are arranged around its base, the sun and moon revolve around its summit, and the layers of heavens rise above it, while the realms of deities, demons, and hells extend below. It is the central pivot upon which the entire wheel of samsara, the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, turns. For medieval Tibetan scholars, this was not a symbolic metaphor but a literal cosmological truth, a divine blueprint that informed every aspect of their spiritual and scientific pursuit of knowledge. This profound belief in a structured, mountain-centric cosmos directly fueled the development of a unique and sophisticated tradition of astronomy known as scar artsize. Tibetan astronomical calculations were not aimed at exploring a random universe but at mapping a sacred one with Meru as its fixed center. This required a radically different perspective from the Western model. In the Meru system, the Earth is not a sphere orbiting the Sun. It is a flat, circular plane with the cosmic mountain at its center. The stars, planets, sun, and moon were understood to revolve around Meru's axis, their orbits and rhythms dictating the flow of time and fate. This cosmological view was not a barrier to science. It was the very framework that gave their calculations profound meaning. The primary purpose of scar artsize was to create accurate calendars for scheduling religious festivals and determining astrologically auspicious times for every activity, from planting crops to undertaking a journey or even starting a war. The position of the planets relative to the axis of Meru was believed to directly influence the flow of spiritual energy in the world, making astronomy a vital tool for maintaining cosmic and social harmony. The most breathtaking fusion of this celestial concept and spiritual practice is found in the intricate design of the sand mandala. These are not merely beautiful paintings, they are, in essence, three-dimensional maps of the cosmos with Mount Meru at their center, painstakingly constructed from millions of grains of colored sand. When a team of monks creates a mandala, they are not creating art, they are building a model of the universe according to the divine blueprint. The process begins with an exact astronomical calculation to determine the most auspicious day and time to commence, aligning the creation of this microcosm with the macrocosm. The design is then drawn with meticulous precision, often using a traditional compass and straightedge, but the geometry is infused with celestial significance. The central point is the summit of Meru. The concentric circles radiating outward represent the orbits of the planets, the continents, and the celestial spheres. Each color, symbol, and deity placed within the intricate pattern corresponds to a celestial body or a directional protector, creating a complete astrological and cosmological chart. This architectural vision of the cosmos also gave rise to unique and precise astronomical instruments. One of the most remarkable was the Pemkung, or the Meru calculator. This was a complex, multi-tiered brass instrument that resembled a miniature model of the cosmic mountain itself. Each tier represented a different celestial orbit or a specific cycle of time. Smaller rings, representing the orbits of the planets, would rotate around a central axis pin that stood for Meru. By aligning these rings with calculations based on the positions of the sun, moon, and planets, a trained astrologer priest could solve complex problems, such as predicting eclipses or determining the exact moment of the Lunar New Year. The entire device was a physical manifestation of the belief that to understand the motion of the heavens, one had to replicate the sacred architecture of the universe. Using the Pemkung was therefore a meditative and devotional act, a way of holding the axis of the cosmos in one's hands and participating directly in its divine order. The legacy of Mount Meru is a powerful testament to the idea that our models of the universe, whether built of mathematics or myth, are ultimately attempts to find our place within the grand scheme of existence. For the medieval Tibetans, the mountain was both a spiritual anchor and a scientific datum point. It provided a complete and coherent system that explained not only the movements of the stars, but also the purpose of human life within a vast, interconnected, and meaningful cosmos. Their celestial wisdom teaches us that the urge to map the heavens is often inseparable from the deeper need to find a center, a point from which all things make sense. Deep in the heart of Slavic mythology, nestled among tales of forest spirits and household gods, lies a celestial story of profound cosmic responsibility, the legend of the Zoria sisters. These three divine guardians were entrusted with the most critical duty imaginable, watching over a captive god of chaos and keeping the very universe from unraveling. The most well-known are Zoria Utraniea, the Lady of the Morning Star, who opens the gates of the palace each dawn for her father, the sun god Dajbog, to ride out across the sky, and Zoria Vetraniea, the Lady of the Evening Star, who closes those same gates at dusk after his daily journey is done. But there exists a third, more mysterious sister, Zoria Polonochnaya, the Lady of the Midnight Star, who is said to watch over the darkest hours, a time when the veil between worlds is thinnest. Their eternal vigilance was focused on a fearsome prisoner, the god Simargl, a chained hound of chaos who, if ever he were to break free from his celestial bonds and devour the constellation Ursa Minor, would cause the cosmic axis to shatter and all of creation to collapse. This powerful myth of cosmic guardianship was far more than a story to medieval Slavic societies. It was a fundamental principle that organized their understanding of time, space, and their place within the natural world. The predictable, reliable appearances of the morning and evening stars became a divine clock, a sign that the Zoria sisters were faithfully performing their duties and that the world remained safe and ordered. This belief directly shaped their timekeeping practices, moving beyond simple sun up and sun down to a more nuanced three-part division of the day governed by the stars themselves. The day began with the sighting of the morning star, a moment marked by a silent prayer or a small offering of grain tossed into the hearthfire as thanks to Zoria Utraniea for another day of light. The appearance of the evening star signaled the time to cease labor and return home under the protective watch of Zoria Vetraniea, and the dark, silent period overseen by the elusive midnight star was a time of caution and rest when the world was most vulnerable and the balance was most delicate. This celestial framework was meticulously formalized in medieval Slavic agricultural and ritual calendars, often carved into wooden sticks or etched onto clay pots. These were not simple tally marks, they were symbolic maps of the heavens that encoded the wisdom of the Zoria myth. A surviving example, a wooden kokoshnik calendar from the Novgorod region dated to the 12th century, shows a series of notches and carved symbols. Alongside marks for solstices and planting seasons, there are three distinct star-shaped carvings positioned at specific intervals. Scholars interpreting this calendar believe these represent the three crucial Zoria hours, the moments when each sister is believed to hold the most influence. The first star is placed at the notch for dawn, the second at twilight, and a third, smaller and deeper cut star, is located at the midpoint of the night, a direct reference to the vigilant watch of Zoria Polonochnaya. These calendars guided not only daily chores but also the timing of important rituals. Contracts were signed under the morning star for prosperity, while protective charms were woven under the evening star to safeguard the household through the night. For medieval Slavic navigators, particularly the famed river traders of the Dnieper and Volga, the Zoria sisters became literal guiding stars. Their journey was a constant negotiation between the ordered world of the riverbanks and the vast, unpredictable darkness of the surrounding forests and seas. The stars of the sisters, Venus as both morning and evening star, and a fainter star like Polaris or a specific star in Cygnus, sometimes associated with the midnight watch, provided a spiritual and practical compass. A navigator would use the first sighting of the morning star to confirm his eastern bearing at dawn, offering a small piece of bread or a drop of mead over the side of his boat as an offering to Zoria Atroniaea for a safe passage. The evening star would then help him correct his course at dusk, its position relative to the setting sun providing a fixed point for westward travel. The most fascinating application, however, was during the perilous overnight journeys, without the sun to guide them, and with the ever-present fear of getting lost in the featureless blackness, navigators would turn to the myth of the third sister. They believed that Zoria Polynochnia's star, often identified with the steadfast Polaris, was the clearest and most reliable during the deepest night because that was when her vigilance was at its peak. By keeping this star directly astern or ahead of their vessel, they could maintain a true north-south bearing along the rivers. There are accounts from Byzantine traders who marveled at the ability of Slavic boatmen to travel through pitch-black nights and thick river fogs with unwavering confidence, a skill the Slavs themselves attributed not just to stellar observation, but to the divine protection of the three celestial sisters who kept the axis of the world, and by extension, their course secure and stable. This beautiful intertwining of deep myth and practical science highlights a universal truth that our oldest stories often contain the seeds of our most profound understandings, providing both a map for the heavens and a compass for the human soul. While the Tibetans looked to a fixed cosmic axis and the Slavs to ever-vigilant guardians, the Polynesian voyagers who settled the vast Pacific Ocean faced a different celestial challenge altogether. The sun itself, whose hurried journey across the sky offered too little light for the work of fishing and building. From this need was born one of the most audacious myths in human history, the legend of the demigod Maui slowing the sun. As the story goes, the people of the islands were struggling, their days too short to dry top a cloth, to fish, or to properly cook their food. The sun, La, raced across the sky with blinding speed. Moved by his people's plight, the trickster hero Maui devised a bold plan. With the help of his brothers, he wove an incredibly strong rope from the hair of his sister and journeyed to the great pit on the island of Maui where the sun rose each morning. As La burst forth, Maui and his brothers lassoed the sun's rays with their rope, holding it fast. Maui then, with his mighty fishhook, struck the sun until it, weakened and humbled, agreed to move more slowly across the sky, thereby granting humanity the long, productive days we know today. For the Polynesian wayfinders who undertook the most expansive migration in human history, this was not merely a story about the length of a day. It was a foundational cosmological truth that explained the very mechanics of the sun's path. It established that the sun's journey was not a fixed, unchangeable law, but a negotiated relationship between humanity and the cosmos. This belief empowered them. If a hero could tame the sun, then a skilled navigator could certainly learn to read its path with intimate precision. This myth provided the philosophical courage to undertake voyages of thousands of kilometers across the open ocean in double-hulled canoes, trusting in their ability to negotiate with the elements through knowledge and ritual. The long days won by Maui were not just for drying fish, they were for navigation, providing more hours of crucial daylight for reading the ocean swells, the flight paths of birds, and the subtle signs of distant land. This celestial wisdom was codified into one of the most sophisticated non-instrument navigation systems ever developed. The Polynesian star compass, or cape, Huwetu, was not a physical object but a complex mental construct that divided the horizon into 32 houses. Each house was not defined by cardinal directions like north or south, but by the rising and setting points of key stars and constellations. The center of this mental compass was the canoe itself, which remained fixed while the star paths revolved around it. A master navigator, or PWO, would have memorized the star that rose from each house for every night of the year. To sail towards a known island, they would simply keep the canoe aligned with the specific star house associated with that destination. As that star moved across the sky or dipped below the horizon, the navigator would seamlessly transition to the next star rising from the same point on the horizon, maintaining a constant bearing. This system turned the entire dome of the night sky into a precise, rotating navigational chart. The myth of Maui directly influenced the most critical technique for finding land, the concept of the star path. Just as Maui knew exactly where the sun would rise, navigators knew the precise sequence of stars that would pass directly over their target island. A voyage from Raiatea to Hawaii, for instance, would follow the path of the star Arcturus, known as Folklore. The navigator wouldn't just aim in the general direction. They would sail a course that kept Folklore directly overhead as it transited, a technique that required an incredible understanding of stellar motion and dead reckoning. During the day, when the stars were absent, they utilized the sun. The zenith of the sun at noon was a crucial marker, but its rising and setting points were even more vital. Here, the lessons of Maui were practical, because the sun's rising and setting points shift north and south with the seasons. The navigator had to apply a mental correction, a kind of Maui adjustment, to their course. They didn't see this as a complication, but as the sun living up to its promise to move in a predictable, albeit slower, pattern that could be learned and mapped. This knowledge was passed down through chants and oral traditions that were as precise as any written almanac. The Kowa chants listed the stars in the order of their appearance throughout the night, while wave chants, or ko nolu, described the unique ocean swells refracted around islands which could be felt miles from shore. A navigator guiding a canoe from Tahiti to the Marquesas would be chanting the star sequence, feeling for the specific swell pattern that bends around Nuku Hiva, and watching for the golden plover, a bird known to fly from land to sea each evening. The entire voyage was a continuous act of multisensory wayfinding, a dialogue with the natural world guided by a mythology that said such a dialogue was not only possible but heroic. The legacy of Maui is not just a longer day, it is a testament to human ingenuity, proving that the greatest voyages begin not with a map, but with a story that challenges the very motion of the heavens. Isolated for centuries on the remote Bandiagara escarpment in what is now Maui, the Dogon people developed a cosmology so precise and so specific that it would baffle and astonish the Western astronomers who first learned of it in the 20th century. Their celestial wisdom, passed down through generations of spiritual leaders known as the Hogon, centers on the star we call Sirius, the brightest in our night sky. But the Dogon understanding of this system goes far beyond a single point of light. For them, the most important celestial body is not Sirius A, but a tiny, incredibly dense companion star they call Potolo, the Digitaria star. They describe it as the smallest and heaviest thing in the universe, made of a metal called sagala, which they say is heavier than all the iron on Earth. They state that Potolo orbits Sirius in an elongated, elliptical path, completing a full revolution every 50 years. This is not a vague myth, it is a precise astronomical description. The staggering part is that this dense companion, which Western science only confirmed and named Sirius B in the 19th century, is a white dwarf star, a class of stars so small and dense that a teaspoon of its matter would weigh several tons. For a people without telescopes to possess this knowledge is nothing short of miraculous, and its preservation through the medieval period is a testament to the power of their oral tradition. This wisdom was not merely academic for the Dogon, it was the very core of their spiritual and ritual life, meticulously preserved through the medieval era and beyond. Their entire societal calendar was structured around the 50-year orbital cycle of Potolo, an event they marked with the most significant ceremony in their culture, the Sigui festival. This festival, which can last for over a year of preparations and rituals, is a grand renewal ceremony, a recommitment to the cosmic order and a reenactment of the creation of the world. The timing of the Sigwi is not arbitrary. It is calculated with extreme precision by the Hogon priests who track the motion of Sirius with careful naked eye observation, using the star's heliacal rising, its first appearance above the horizon just before sunrise after a period of invisibility, to calibrate their celestial calendar. This long-term tracking across generations allowed them to accurately mark the 50-year cycle of a star they could not physically see, a feat of observational dedication that rivals any medieval European or Islamic observatory. The preservation of this complex knowledge was achieved through a sophisticated system of symbols, rituals, and artifacts that functioned as a living library. During the medieval period, Dogon blacksmiths and artisans created objects that encoded this celestial understanding in tangible form. One of the most significant is the Kanaga mask, a tall, wooden ritual mask worn during dances. While its abstract form is often interpreted as a bird or a crocodile, its structure is also a precise cosmological diagram. The horizontal crossbar represents the elliptical orbital path of Ptolemy around Sirius A, while the vertical elements symbolize the axis of the universe and the connection between the celestial and earthly realms. The dancers who wear these masks perform specific movements that trace this elliptical path, physically embodying the cosmic dance of the stars and locking the astronomical knowledge into muscle memory and communal ritual. Perhaps the most compelling medieval Dogon artifacts that demonstrate this advanced understanding are their intricately carved wooden sanctuary doors and house posts. These are not merely decorative, they are didactic tools, celestial maps carved in relief. A famous example, now housed in museum collections, depicts the Sirius system with stunning clarity. At the center is a large carved circle representing Sirius A. Orbiting around it, connected by a deeply carved elliptical groove, is a much smaller, densely carved dot representing Ptolemy. Some carvings even include a third, much larger star, Emya, which the Dogon describe as having its own planetary system. While a third star in the Sirius system has not been confirmed by modern astronomy, the existence of a potential Sirius C remains a topic of scientific debate, making the Dogon descriptions all the more intriguing. These doors and posts served as constant reminders of the cosmic order, teaching the mythology and the astronomy to each new generation in a durable, visual format that could withstand centuries. The implications of the Dogon's preserved knowledge are profound, forcing us to reconsider the depth and sophistication of ancient astronomical understanding. It presents a fascinating historical puzzle. How did a culture without optical instruments come to know about a star that requires a powerful telescope to see? The Dogon themselves attribute this wisdom to visitors from the Sirius system itself, the Nomo amphibious, fish-like beings who came to Earth in a spinning arc and gifted them this celestial science. While anthropologists suggest the knowledge may have been acquired through contact with Western astronomers or Islamic scholars in the distant past, no clear historical pathway for such a transfer has been definitively established, especially one that would have provided such accurate details about an invisible star. The Dogon Sirius mystery ultimately stands as a powerful testament to the human capacity for observation, memory, and the profound desire to weave our lives into the grand, mysterious tapestry of the cosmos, preserving a glimmer of celestial truth in the heart of Africa for 1,000 years. Yet another cautionary tale of celestial ambition echoes from a much earlier time, found not in myth but in the foundational text of the Hebrew Bible. The story of the Tower of Babel presents a starkly different vision of humanity's relationship with the heavens. Unlike Maui's successful negotiation or the Dogon's received wisdom, this narrative describes a profound failure. According to the Book of Genesis, in the era following the Great Flood, all of humanity spoke a single language and settled in the land of Shinar. There, they resolved to build a city with a tower so immense that its top would reach into the heavens. Their stated goal was not just to touch the celestial realm, but to make a name for ourselves and avoid being scattered across the earth. This project of unified human effort was seen by God not as an admirable feat of engineering, but as an act of dangerous hubris. To stop them, he confounded their single language into many, causing such confusion that construction halted instantly. The people were then scattered across the globe, and the city was named Babel from the Hebrew word for confuse. For medieval Christian and Jewish scholars poring over this text, the Tower of Babel was not merely a story about linguistic origins. It was a rich, multi-layered allegory about the proper and improper pursuit of celestial knowledge. They interpreted the tower itself as a symbol of human arrogance, a literal and metaphorical overreach into the divine domain of astronomy and cosmology. The great Jewish commentator Rashi, writing in 11th century France, noted that the builders' intention to reach the heavens was not just physical but spiritual. They sought to storm the abode of God, to challenge divine authority by attempting to control the very machinery of the cosmos. This reading framed the tower as the ultimate symbol of astronomical ambition divorced from piety, a warning that studying the heavens without humility could lead to a catastrophic fall. This interpretation directly influenced how medieval astronomers viewed their own work. The scattering of the people and the confusion of languages were seen as an allegory for the fundamental difficulty of achieving precise astronomical understanding. The universe, in its vast complexity, speaks a language of mathematics and motion that is incredibly difficult to decipher. The post-Babel world, they reasoned, was one where perfect knowledge of the cosmos was forever beyond humanity's grasp, a permanent reminder of our limitations. This view did not discourage scientific pursuit, but rather framed it as a pious, albeit humbling, endeavor to slowly reclaim a fragment of that lost unity through careful observation and devotion. A stunning example of this allegorical thinking is found in the writings of the English scholastic philosopher Robert Grosseteste in the 13th century. In his treatise De Arca No on Noah's Ark, he draws a direct parallel between the ark, which saved humanity through obedience, and the tower, which scattered it through pride. Grosseteste argued that the ark represented the right way to approach celestial wisdom, as a vessel of salvation built to divine specifications. The tower, by contrast, represented a human-made structure built on flawed, earthly principles. He even suggested that the mathematical and geometric knowledge required to build a stable ark, a divinely approved project, was a form of sacred astronomy, while the engineering behind the tower was a profane mimicry of that same knowledge. Perhaps the most concrete medieval connection between the Babel story and astronomy comes from the work of Gersonides, a 14th century Jewish philosopher, astronomer, and Talmudist living in Provence. In his monumental astronomical work, The Wars of the Lord, he engages with the Ptolemaic model of the universe. While accepting much of its mathematics, he critiques its complexity, arguing that a truly divine cosmos would be more elegantly structured. In his commentary on the Torah, he explicitly links this critique to the Tower of Babel. He proposes that the builders' sin was not ambition itself, but their flawed methodology. They believed they could understand the heavens by building upward from the earth, using a material, human-centered perspective. Gersonides argued that true astronomical understanding must begin from the top down, by first accepting divine principles of order and harmony, and then working to see them reflected in the observed motions of the planets. Their tower, and by extension their astronomy, collapsed because it was built on a foundation of sand, not on the solid rock of faith and first principles. In this view, the confusion of languages was not just a punishment, but a metaphor for the bewildering complexity of a universe studied without the guiding light of divine truth, a complexity that medieval astronomers like himself were patiently working to untangle through a more humble, pious form of inquiry. High in the Andes, where the air grows thin and the peaks seem to brush the very vault of heaven, the Inca civilization saw the cosmos not as a distant realm, but as a world intimately connected to their own. Theirs was a vision of sacred geography, and at the heart of this belief was the powerful legend of the heavenly bridge, the Kaicha, or rainbow. To the Inca, the rainbow was not an atmospheric accident. It was a vibrant, luminous pathway created by the sun god Inti, a bridge of shimmering light that connected the earthly world, K-Pacha, directly to the celestial realm of the gods, Hanan-Pacha. This was more than a beautiful symbol. It was a divine conduit, a promise that the realms were not separate but could be joined, allowing for the flow of energy, blessings, and communication between humanity and the divine. The appearance of a rainbow after a storm was a moment of profound significance, interpreted as a direct sign of the gods' favor and a reaffirmation of this sacred connection. This core belief that the celestial could be made manifest on Earth became the absolute foundational principle behind the most breathtaking architectural and astronomical achievements of the Inca Empire. This profound cosmological vision found its ultimate expression in the meticulous design and placement of their most sacred cities, with Machu Picchu standing as the undisputed masterpiece. The entire site is a physical manifestation of the heavenly bridge concept, a deliberate effort to fuse the earthly and celestial realms into a single harmonious whole. The architects and priest astronomers of the Inca did not simply build on the mountain. They integrated their construction with the very bones of the Andes, aligning structures with precise solar, lunar, and stellar events to create a permanent stone version of the Kaicha. The famous Intihuatana stone, the hitching post of the sun, is the most vivid example of this. This intricately carved granite pillar was not a sundial. It was a supremely sophisticated astronomical instrument. During the equinoxes, the sun stands directly above the pillar, casting no shadow whatsoever, a moment where the sun is perfectly hitched to the earth, symbolizing the ultimate connection between Hanan-Pacha and K-Pacha. The Inca believed that this sacred stone physically anchored the sun in its path, preventing it from disappearing entirely during the winter solstice and ensuring its life-giving return. The celestial alignments woven into the fabric of Machu Picchu are astonishing in their precision and variety. The Temple of the Sun, with its elegantly curved wall and trapezoidal window, is perfectly oriented to capture the first rays of the rising sun during the June solstice, illuminating a ceremonial stone inside with a focused beam of light. Similarly, the central plaza is aligned along a precise north-south axis, and certain carefully placed windows in the residential sectors frame the heliacal rising of specific star clusters like the Pleiades, which the Inca called Colca, meaning storehouse, and associated with the future harvest and the well-being of the empire. But the genius of Inca celestial wisdom extended beyond grand temples to the very pathways that connected their world. The extensive network of Quhapacñan, the royal roads that stretched for thousands of miles across the empire, often incorporated this cosmological principle. Certain stretches of road were deliberately aligned to frame significant celestial bodies on the horizon on specific dates, transforming a journey into a walking meditation through a sacred, astronomically calibrated landscape. A traveler walking a particular road at dawn on the spring equinox might experience the sun rising directly ahead, perfectly centered on the path, as if they were walking straight up the heavenly bridge itself. This architectural philosophy was replicated, albeit on a smaller scale, in numerous other sites. At the temple complex of Coricancha in Cusco, the central temple of the sun was surrounded by smaller chapels dedicated to the moon, stars, and lightning, each positioned to reflect the perceived hierarchy of the celestial realm. The walls were once sheathed in gold to mirror the brilliance of Inti, and strategically placed niches likely held gold and silver artifacts that would catch the light of the rising sun at specific times of the year, creating a man-made rainbow of reflected light within the temple, a permanent indoor kaicha for the emperor and high priests to behold. The lasting impact of this celestial wisdom is a testament to the Incas' profound understanding of their environment and their place within the cosmos. Their cities were not just built for the living, they were designed as permanent anchors for the celestial, ensuring that the heavenly bridge would never fade and that the divine order would forever be reflected in the stone and spirit of their civilization. Woven into the rich tapestry of 1001 Nights is a tale that captures a universal human longing, the dream of unshackling oneself from the earth and soaring freely among the stars. This is, of course, the story of the magic carpet, a wondrous vehicle that obeys the command of its rider, lifting them high above the world to traverse vast deserts and glittering cities in the blink of an eye. In these stories, the carpets were more than mere transportation. They were symbols of ultimate wisdom and authority, granted only to the most worthy of individuals like King Solomon, who was said to command a carpet of green silk so vast it could carry his entire army, with the winds themselves obediently placed beneath it. This imagery of a guided, effortless journey through the air resonated profoundly across the medieval Islamic world, becoming a powerful allegory for a new and revolutionary way of understanding the cosmos itself. For the brilliant astronomers working during the Islamic Golden Age in great centers of learning like Baghdad and Marrakech, the familiar motion of the magic carpet provided a perfect conceptual model to explain a perplexing astronomical problem. They had inherited the complex Ptolemaic system from the Greeks, which relied on cumbersome mathematical devices like epicycles and eccentrics to explain the occasional looping retrograde motion of the planets. While the math worked, the model felt mechanically awkward, a series of celestial cogs and wheels that lacked a sense of elegant, unified motion. The flying carpet story offered a more graceful and intellectually satisfying alternative. Scholars began to envision the planets not as pins stuck on rotating crystalline spheres, but as intelligent entities riding their own divine vehicles across the sky, following predetermined, smooth, and circular paths ordained by God. The carpet became a metaphor for the planet's orbital sphere itself, a guided, purposeful vehicle for a celestial traveler. This allegory was explicitly adopted and refined in the work of the 11th century Persian polymath Ibn Sina, known in the West as Avicenna. In his seminal Book of Healing, a vast philosophical and scientific encyclopedia, he dedicates a section to critiquing Ptolemaic astronomy. He argues against the physical reality of epicycles, describing them as a mathematical contrivance rather than a true description of nature. To explain planetary motion without them, he turned to the concept of an internal driving force, an innate intelligence within the planet. He poetically described this as the planet's quwa nafsaniya, or animating force, a kind of celestial instinct that guided it on its path, much like a skilled rider guiding a magic carpet with effortless intention. This wasn't a retreat into mysticism. It was an attempt to find a more natural philosophical principle behind the mathematics, and the cultural touchstone of the magic carpet made this complex idea accessible and relatable to his students and peers. The metaphor evolved from a philosophical concept into a practical tool for calculation in the hands of later astronomers. Nasir al-Din al-Tusi, the director of the magnificent Marrakech Observatory in the 13th century, faced the same Ptolemaic problems. In developing his famous Tusi couple, a mathematical device that generated linear motion from two circular motions, he was essentially providing the precise geometric recipe for how that magic carpet could change its course smoothly without any jerks or violations of circular motion. While his work was highly technical, his contemporaries understood it through the lens of the familiar allegory. The planetary orb was the carpet, and the mathematical rules of the Tusi couple were the hidden command that guided it. This fusion of imaginative narrative and rigorous mathematics is a hallmark of medieval Islamic science, demonstrating how a compelling story can provide the mental scaffolding for groundbreaking theoretical advances. The imagery proved so enduring that it found its way into the titles and illustrative diagrams of medieval astronomical texts. a beautifully illuminated manuscript from 15th century Persia, a copy of al-Sufi's Book of Fixed Stars, contains a marginal illustration that perfectly encapsulates this synthesis. It depicts the planet Jupiter not as a simple point of light, but as a majestic figure seated confidently upon a richly patterned, undulating carpet that flows along the path of the zodiac, gracefully arching over the constellation figures below. The artist wasn't merely decorating the page, he was visually articulating a sophisticated scientific concept for an educated viewer. The carpet's motion represented the planet's deferent, its primary circle, while the figure of Jupiter himself, moving slightly back and forth upon it, represented the epicycle, a visual distillation of the very mathematical model the text was describing, all framed within a cultural narrative everyone knew and understood. This seamless blend of art, myth, and science ensured that the celestial wisdom of the astronomers was not confined to an elite few, but was woven into the very cultural fabric, making the profound mysteries of the heavens feel a little closer, a little more familiar, and infinitely more magical. In the frozen landscapes of Finland, where the winter night seems to stretch into eternity, a different kind of celestial treasure was sought not in the stars themselves, but in the mythic artifact they were said to have forged. The epic poem known as the Kalevala tells of the Sampo, a magical device of incomprehensible power. Forged by the divine smith Ilmarinen, it was no mere object but a cosmic engine of creation. Its lid rotated like a celestial millstone, and from its side it ground out an endless bounty, salt for preserving life, grain for nourishment, and gold for prosperity. It was the ultimate source of ani, or good fortune, and its theft by the sorceress Lauhai of the cold northern land of Pohjola sparks the epic's central conflict, a quest to reclaim this source of cosmic abundance for the people. For medieval Finnish Neuters or shamans, the Sampo was far more than a plot device in a heroic saga. It was a profound cosmological symbol directly linked to the celestial pole. They interpreted its rotating, mill-like nature as a metaphor for the unchanging pivot point around which the entire night sky turns, the North Star, which in Finnish is tellingly named Tähti, simply meaning star, as it was the singular, fixed point of reference in the swirling heavens. The bounty it produced, grain, salt, and coin, was seen as a divine parallel to the life-giving energy that flows from the ordered movements of the stars themselves. The shaman's role was to act as a kind of celestial Ilmarinen, to understand the workings of this cosmic Sampo and harness its energy for the benefit of their community. This symbolic connection formed the basis of a unique form of astronomical divination. A Neuter would not simply look at the stars, they would enter a trance state, often induced by rhythmic chanting, the steady beat of a drum, and the intense heat of a sauna, a sacred space believed to be a microcosm of the universe. In this altered state, they would journey to the spirit realm, seeking a vision of the celestial Sampo to diagnose the causes of misfortune. If a village was suffering from a poor harvest, the shaman might determine through their vision that the lid of the Sampo, the apparent motion of the stars around the pole, was out of alignment with the earthly realm, perhaps due to a specific constellation being obscured by clouds for too long during a critical planting phase. Their primary tool for this practice was a special handcrafted drum, the canis or govdis, whose skin was painted with an intricate map of the cosmos. This was not a random collection of symbols but a precise sacred diagram. At the center of the drumhead, a large cross or circle always represented the North Star, the axis of the sky, the Sampo's central pivot. Radiating out from this center were the major constellations and spirit figures that governed different aspects of life. The position of the Big Dipper, known as Ottava or the Salmon Weir, was particularly crucial as its rotation around the pole was used to mark the hours of the night and the changing seasons. During a ritual, the Neuter would place a brass or pewter ring, representing the wandering planets or the shifting forces of fate, upon the drumskin. They would then tap the drum gently, causing the ring to bounce and move across the painted symbols. The final resting place of the ring, whether it landed on the symbol for a fruitful constellation or a more ominous spirit, would be interpreted as an answer from the celestial Sampo itself, revealing the actions needed to restore balance and bring back prosperity. This practice had direct, vital applications for survival in an unforgiving climate. One documented example involves the timing of the spring rye sowing. The success of the entire year's harvest depended on planting at the exact moment the ground had thawed sufficiently, but before the threat of a late frost returned. A Noiter would be consulted to read the signs. They would perform their ritual, focusing their journey on the position of the Pleiades star cluster, which the Finns called Silmater, the star eyes. If the ring on their drum came to rest on the symbol for Silmater while it was depicted in a certain position relative to the horizon on their drum chart, it was a sign that the celestial Sampo was grinding out the right conditions for sowing. The community would then begin the planting process with confidence, trusting in this divination that was, in reality, a sophisticated form of phenology correlating stellar positions with seasonal environmental cues. The enduring power of the Sampo myth lies in this beautiful synthesis. It provided a framework for understanding the universe as an interactive, responsive system, where human ritual and celestial observation worked in concert to nurture life and invite fortune from the great millstone of the sky. A heartbreaking story of sacrifice and familial love shines brightly from the Korean peninsula, offering a celestial explanation for the sun and moon that guided an entire nation's relationship with the seasons. The legend tells of a time when the world was plunged into darkness, terrorized by a fearsome tiger that had already devoured a mother who was out gathering wild herbs for her two hungry children. The tiger, still craving more, pursued the brother and sister back to their home. In a desperate act to save them, their ancestors transformed the children, hiding them from the beast. They raised the sister high into the sky, where she became the brilliant, warm sun. To keep her from being lonely, they then sent her brother up to join her, but fearing the world would be too bright with both siblings shining at once, they made him the gentler, cooler moon. This tale of a sister's luminous protection and a brother's quieter, companionable presence became the foundational narrative for how medieval Koreans understood the two great lights in the sky. This narrative was far more than a simple folk tale. It was a cosmological framework that deeply influenced the development of Korea's unique lunisolar calendar systems during the Goryeo and Joseon dynasties. Court astronomers and calendar makers known as Gwansangam saw the sun and moon not as impersonal celestial bodies, but as the divine siblings from the myth. This personification directly shaped their timekeeping philosophy. The solar year, governed by the sun sister, was associated with warmth, growth, and the outward, active principles of yang. The lunar months, governed by the moon brother, were associated with coolness, reflection, rest, and the inward, receptive principles of yin. The entire calendar was thus a careful balancing act between these two sibling energies. The most important dates were those that honored their relationship, particularly the day of the full moon, which was seen as the moment the brother moon was at his fullest strength, able to reflect his sister's light most completely back to the earth below. This mythologically informed calendar was not an abstract concept. It was the absolute backbone of medieval Korean agricultural life. The solar terms, which divided the year into 24 precise segments based on the sun's position, were the domain of the sun sister. These terms, with names like Jongchip, the day insects awaken, and Chunbun, the spring equinox, dictated the timing for planting rice and barley. However, the actual scheduling of these activities was conducted by the lunar month, the domain of the moon brother. This created a beautifully synergistic system. A farmer would know from the solar term that the weather was right for planting, but he would consult the lunar calendar to choose the most auspicious day within that window. For instance, planting was often scheduled for the days just after the new moon, when the moon brother was beginning to wax or grow, symbolizing the desired growth of the seeds. This practice of harmonizing the solar and lunar cycles was seen as a way to gain the favor of both celestial siblings, ensuring a bountiful harvest. The reverence for this celestial relationship culminated in the invention of some of the medieval era's most sophisticated astronomical instruments, each designed to measure the harmonious dance of the brother and sister. The most magnificent of these was the Jajongnu, or the striking clepsydra, developed under King Sejong the Great in the 15th century. This was not a simple water clock. It was an automated wonder that used a constant flow of water to power a series of mechanisms that not only told the time but also announced it with striking bells, gongs, and drums. Its design was a direct homage to the myth. The relentless, constant flow of water that powered the clock was seen as a metaphor for the constant, reliable journey of the sun's sister. The audible strikes that marked the passage of the hours were the voice of the moon brother, calling out to his sister and to the people on Earth, marking the shared passage of their time. Even more precise was the angbulgu, a hemispherical sundial shaped like a bowl. Its unique design allowed it to account for the seasonal variations in the sun's path. The central gnomon that cast the shadow was representative of the celestial axis, while the curved lines within the bowl traced the sun sister's changing height in the sky throughout the year. What makes the angbulgu particularly remarkable is that its hour lines were also calibrated to be used in conjunction with the lunar calendar for timekeeping at night. During the day, it tracked the sun's movement. On clear nights, by the light of the full moon, the moon brother at his brightest, the same instrument could be used to tell time, as the moon's shadow would also fall along the calibrated lines. This single, elegant instrument was thus a physical manifestation of the sibling myth, a tool that could read the time from both the sun and the moon, uniting their two reigns in a single, beautiful bronze object. The legacy of this story is a profound reminder that our oldest tales often provide the deepest wisdom, teaching us to see the universe not as a collection of objects, but as a family of forces forever bound by love and shared purpose. Embedded within the chivalric romances of King Arthur lies a profound celestial secret, a belief that the rightful ruler of Britain was not merely a political leader but a cosmic sovereign whose authority was written in the stars. The most iconic moment, the drawing of the sword from the stone, is far more than a test of strength. It is a moment of celestial alignment. In many medieval tellings, the stone is not just a rock but an anvil, a symbol of divine forging, and the sword itself is often described as gleaming with a light not of this world. This sword, which would later be replaced by the Lady of the Lake's Excalibur, represents more than a weapon. It is cosmic order made manifest in cold, hard steel. The act of pulling it free signifies that Arthur is the one individual whose personal virtue and destiny are in perfect harmony with the intended order of the universe, a living embodiment of the divine right to rule that was believed to be orchestrated by the heavens themselves. Medieval authors, particularly Geoffrey of Monmouth in his History of the Kings of Britain, and later writers like Sir Thomas Malory, wove astronomical references throughout the Arthurian cycle to reinforce this idea. The constellation most frequently associated with Arthur is Ursa Major, the Great Bear, which was often called Arthur's Wain or Arthur's Chariot in medieval Britain. The 7 bright stars of the Big Dipper were seen as his heavenly chariot, carrying him across the night sky in an eternal vigil over his kingdom. This wasn't just a charming nickname, it was a direct claim that the king's power was as constant and cyclical as the motion of the stars. Furthermore, the legendary wizard Merlin, Arthur's advisor, is consistently portrayed as a master astrologer and astronomer. His prophecies and his magical interventions are almost always timed according to specific celestial events. He doesn't just act, he waits for the optimal astrological moment when the planets are arranged in a configuration that aligns with his intended outcome, using the heavens as his guide and his clock. This celestial subtext was not lost on medieval readers who were far more literate in the language of the stars than we are today. For them, these references were glaring clues, a divine commentary on the narrative. When a manuscript illustration depicts Arthur's crown adorned with stars or shows his banner bearing a celestial dragon, it is a direct assertion of his cosmic legitimacy. Readers interpreted these clues through the lens of Ptolemaic cosmology, which saw the Earth as the center of a series of nested, rotating spheres, each governed by a celestial intelligence. A true and just king on Earth was believed to be a reflection of the perfect order of those higher spheres. Disorder in the kingdom, such as the strife that leads to the Battle of Camlan, was often preceded by or described alongside ominous celestial signs like comets or eclipses, signaling that the harmony between the earthly and celestial realms was breaking down. A breathtaking example of this interpretation is found in the 14th century Morgan Bible, an illuminated manuscript containing Arthurian tales. One illumination depicts the moment Arthur receives Excalibur from the Lady of the Lake. The artist has chosen not to show a secluded forest pool, but instead places the scene under a night sky meticulously painted with accurate constellations. Most prominently, the constellation of Lyra, the harp, is shown directly above Arthur's head. To a medieval viewer, Lyra was associated with harmony, justice, and divine law. Its placement in the scene is a powerful visual argument. Arthur's possession of Excalibur is sanctioned by the music of the spheres themselves, making him the instrument of cosmic harmony on Earth. Another manuscript, a copy of Wace's Roman de Brut, includes a marginal gloss next to the description of Arthur's final journey to Avalon. The anonymous scribe has written, "Sic transit gloria mundi, sicut stella cometa," thus passes the glory of the world like a comet. This poignant note reveals how the reader saw Arthur's life and death through an astronomical lens. His glory was brilliant and awe-inspiring, but like a comet, it was transient, a spectacular but fleeting alignment in the heavens. The enduring power of the Arthurian legend is this seamless fusion of earthly heroism and celestial destiny, a story that assures us that true leadership is not taken, but given, and its signature is written across the stars for those who know how to read it. From the celestial courts of Camelot, we journey now to the vast, wind-swept steppes of Central Asia, where the sky is not a distant tapestry but an all-encompassing, living presence. For the Mongolian peoples, the supreme deity was not a figure in the stars but the very dome of heaven itself, Tengri, the eternal blue sky. This was not a metaphorical concept but a tangible, omnipresent force. The Mongols practiced Tengriism, a shamanistic faith where the endless blue expanse was the primordial father, the source of all life and ultimate authority. The earth, Etujun, was the mother. A person's health, fortune, and success were believed to depend on maintaining a state of Sulda or spirit that was in perfect harmony with the will of Tengri. This profound belief that their entire existence was lived directly under the gaze of a celestial god shaped every aspect of their culture, forging a unique form of celestial wisdom that would become the unseen engine behind the largest contiguous land empire in human history. This deep spiritual connection to the heavens directly dictated the logistical brilliance of the Mongol Empire's military campaigns. Medieval European chroniclers, baffled by the Mongols' lightning-fast maneuvers and seemingly supernatural coordination across thousands of miles, often attributed their success to sheer numbers or demonic aid. In reality, it was a mastery of the skies. The Mongols did not navigate by landmarks, which were scarce on the steppe, but by the sun and stars, reading the heavens with a precision that functioned as a vast natural command and control network. The movement of the sun across the sky dictated the structure of their day, while the constellations were their unchanging map. A general like Subutai, one of Genghis Khan's most brilliant strategists, could issue orders for separate army divisions to converge on a target city from directions hundreds of kilometers apart, with the confidence that each unit would arrive at the exact same time. Their shared celestial literacy, rooted in the worship of Tengri, provided a common, reliable clock and compass that made this possible. A stunning example of this celestial strategy in action was the meticulously planned invasion of the Khwarezmian Empire in the 1219. Genghis Khan's forces were divided into multiple armies, some tasked with crossing the brutal Kizilkum Desert, a feat considered impossible for a large military force. To coordinate this desert crossing, the Mongol commanders used the heliacal rising of the star Antares, known to them as Kara Kas, the Black Bird. Its first appearance before dawn marked the beginning of a specific, short window of time when the desert nights were still cool enough for forced marches, but the dawn would provide just enough light to avoid treacherous terrain. Orders were given that all units were to begin their final push towards the city of Bukhara on the second dawn after the Black Bird's return. This celestial event acted as a synchronized starting pistol for the entire dispersed army. Because every scout and commander was observing the same sky, they could independently confirm the timing without the need for messengers who might be captured or delayed, ensuring a devastatingly coordinated assault that completely overwhelmed their enemies. Beyond grand strategy, the Tengriist belief in the eternal blue sky governed the very rhythm of nomadic life, which in turn was the foundation of Mongol military mobility. Their seasonal migrations were not random wanderings but a precise, celestial-guided dance with nature. The position of the Big Dipper, which they called the Dulun Burken, or Seven Gods, was particularly important. When the bowl of the dipper pointed downward towards the horizon in the autumn, it signaled the time to move to winter pastures in the sheltered valleys, a critical migration to protect their herds, the backbone of their economy and their cavalry from the deadly cold. Conversely, when it swung high overhead in the spring, it was the signal to disperse into the open steppes for summer grazing. This deep understanding of stellar cycles meant that every herdsman was also a part-time astronomer, and every soldier raised in this tradition possessed an innate sense of timing and direction that made the Mongol army uniquely adaptable and self-sufficient. They could live off the land and navigate featureless terrain with an ease that their sedentary, road-dependent enemies could scarcely comprehend, all because they moved with a faith that every step was guided by the will of the eternal blue sky. Far to the east, in the island archipelago that would become the Philippines, a celestial cosmology of breathtaking complexity guided every aspect of life, from the planting of rice to the navigation of the vast ocean between islands. Indigenous belief systems, which varied among the many ethnic groups but shared common threads, envisioned the universe not as a single heaven but as a multi-layered realm, a stacked celestial world often called Kaluwalhation. This was not simply a hierarchy of power but an intricate map of spiritual and physical reality. For the Tagalog people, there were often 3 primary layers, while other groups like the Ifugao spoke of as many as 7 or 9 layered heavens, each with its own distinct purpose and inhabitants. The lowest layer was our own world, the Earth. Above it was the realm of the atmosphere, clouds, and weather governed by deities like the wind god Hangin. Higher still were the successive layers where ancestral spirits resided, and at the very apex was the abode of the supreme deity, Bathala or Kabunion, the creator and ultimate source of order. This vertical cosmology provided a complete framework for understanding humanity's place within a deeply interconnected universe, where the actions of spirits and gods in the upper layers directly influenced the fortunes of those below. This belief in a layered sky world was far from an abstract philosophy. It was a practical, working model that directly dictated the agricultural rhythms essential for survival. The various layers were associated with specific celestial bodies and atmospheric phenomena that served as a divine calendar. The appearance of the star cluster known as the Pleiades, called Moroporo or Lupak by different groups, was of paramount importance. When Moroporo first became visible in the eastern sky just before dawn, its heliacal rising it was interpreted as a direct signal from the 3rd layer of heaven. This event, typically occurring in May, signaled the end of the hot, dry season and the imminent arrival of the monsoon rains. It was the celestial command to begin preparing the rice paddies. The entire community would mobilize for the Pactatanum, the planting season, trusting that the heavenly timing would ensure the rains arrived to nourish the young seedlings. Conversely, the position of the constellation Orion, known as Baltic, which resembles a giant hunter's trap or snare, was seen as a harbinger of the harvest season. When Baltic was high in the night sky during the later part of the year, it was a sign from the sky world that the rice was ready and that the community should prepare for the harvest festival or pagapas. This celestial scheduling was a form of sacred synchrony, aligning human labor with the perceived movements of the deities in the layers above, ensuring that every action on Earth was in harmony with the cosmic order. The true masterpieces of this celestial wisdom, however, were the medieval Philippine maritime traders, the Majinu and Tamawa merchants who plied the routes between islands and across the South China Sea in their magnificent balangay boats. Their navigation techniques were a stunning fusion of deep myth and precise observation, all framed within the cosmology of the layered heavens. They didn't see the stars as distant points of light, but as the shining manifestations of deities and ancestors residing in the specific layers of Kaluwalhatian. To navigate was to engage in a constant dialogue with this celestial world. Their primary tool was a mental star compass of immense sophistication, passed down through generations in the form of chants, stories, and direct apprenticeship. They had memorized the rising and setting points of over 30 key stars and constellations, each one associated with a specific destination or bearing. A navigator aiming for the island of Mindoro from the south would sail towards the point on the horizon where the star Arcturus, known as Mangalagawan, rose. To return, he would follow the setting point of the same star. The most advanced technique, rivaling that of the Polynesians, was star path steering. A navigator wouldn't just follow a single star, he would follow a sequence. To sail from Butuan in Mindanao to Cebu in the Visayas, he would begin his journey at dusk by aligning his vessel with the rising point of the star Spica, known as Malaki or the Large One. As the night progressed and Spica moved across the sky, he would then transition to keeping the constellation Scorpius, specifically the star Antares, off his port side. By dawn, his guide would be the setting point of the Southern Cross. This entire sequence was memorized within a grand narrative, often a story of a mythical hero's journey across the layered heavens, making the technical data unforgettable. Furthermore, they were masters of reading the subtle reflections of the sky world on the ocean itself. The color and quality of the clouds above a distant island, the flight patterns of specific seabirds that nested there, and even the specific swell patterns that refracted around land masses were all interpreted as messages from the celestial layers, providing a multi-sensory navigation system that allowed them to traverse vast distances with astonishing accuracy, guided by the belief that sky above was not empty space but a living, layered world intimately connected to their own. Emerging from the veiled traditions of early Christianity, the Gnostics proposed a vision of the cosmos so radical it redefined the very nature of divinity and the human soul. At the heart of this worldview was the concept of the pleroma, a Greek term meaning fullness. This was not a physical place but a transcendent, luminous realm of pure spirit and absolute perfection, the ultimate source of all that is good and true. The pleroma was understood as a complex hierarchy of divine emanations, known as eons, paired in male-female syzygies, which together formed the body of the supreme, unknowable God. For the Gnostics, our material world was not the creation of this true God, but the tragic, bungled work of a lesser, arrogant being called the Demiurge, who had trapped divine sparks of the pleroma within the flawed prison of human flesh. The ultimate purpose of human existence, therefore, was gnosis, not intellectual knowledge, but a profound, revelatory self-knowledge that one's innermost spirit is an exiled fragment of that divine fullness, and that through this awakening one could begin the arduous journey back home. This profound celestial wisdom, though declared heretical by the Orthodox Church, refused to die. Instead, it flowed like a hidden underground river through the medieval world, resurfacing to nourish the soil of mysticism and the fledgling science of alchemy. Medieval mystics, particularly those in the Rhineland like Meister Eckhart and Hildegard of Bingen, echoed the Gnostic yearning for a return to the divine source, though they framed it within a Christian context. Eckhart's concept of the Godhead, the ground of being beyond the personal God, bears a striking resemblance to the unknowable, transcendent one at the apex of the pleroma. His teachings on the birth of the sun in the soul and the need to achieve a state of detachment to become one with the divine ground are practical mysticism deeply informed by the Gnostic goal of awakening the inner divine spark. For these seekers, celestial wisdom was not about mapping the stars overhead, but about charting the inner landscape of the soul to find the path back to its primordial origin. But it was in the sealed laboratories and encrypted manuscripts of the alchemists that the Gnostic myth of the pleroma found its most elaborate and practical application. Medieval alchemy was never merely about turning lead into gold. It was a profound spiritual discipline, a opus dei or divine work, whose goal was the redemption of matter and the liberation of the spirit trapped within it. The alchemists saw their work as a microcosmic recapitulation of the cosmic drama. The base matter in their flasks was the materia prima, the chaotic, fallen state of the world under the demiurge, teeming with potential but mired in darkness. The alchemical process, through stages of blackening, whitening, yellowing, and finally reddening, was the arduous process of purifying this matter, guiding it through a series of transcendent states until it achieved its perfected form. The philosopher's stone, a symbol of the redeemed, spiritualized matter that had been returned to its primordial, pre-fallen glory, a miniature pleroma in solid form. This allegory is explicitly laid out in some of the most significant alchemical texts of the period. The Rosarium Philosophorum, a series of 20 woodcuts from the 16th century, is a visual guide to the alchemical process that is steeped in Gnostic symbolism. The famed image of the chemical wedding does not just represent the union of sulfur and mercury. It depicts the hieros gamos, the sacred marriage of the masculine and feminine principles, mirroring the syzygies of eons within the pleroma, whose harmonious union results in the creation of the divine child, the reborn and perfected self. Even more strikingly, the Emerald Tablet of Hermes Trismegistus, the foundational text for all medieval alchemy, opens with the declaration, "That which is above is like to that which is below, and that which is below is like to that which is above, to accomplish the miracles of one thing." This famous axiom was the alchemist's key. The one thing was the divine unity of the pleroma, and the miracles were the operations performed in the lab to bring the fragmented, fallen world below back into harmony with the perfect, unified realm above. Their distillation apparatus became a model of the cosmos itself. The furnace was the material world, the rising vapors were the ascending soul, and the condenser where the purified spirit dripped back down was the moment of divine revelation, the gnosis that reunites the spark with its source. In this way, the alchemists saw themselves as a co-redeemer with Christ, actively working to heal the rupture between spirit and matter, and through their sacred art, helping to restore the entire cosmos to its original, intended state of divine fullness. Within the ancient and enduring faith of Zoroastrianism, the cosmos is alive with unseen protectors, a concept that would profoundly shape the scientific and spiritual landscape of medieval Persia. These are the Fravashis, the celestial guardian spirits of every created thing from the smallest pebble to the greatest king, and even the sun and moon themselves. More than just passive angels, the Fravashis are the perfect heavenly archetypes of all that exists, their divine essence guiding and protecting their earthly counterparts. They are described as a mighty army that descends to the material world at the time of the spring equinox, bringing renewal and strength, and they are fiercely invested in the cosmic struggle between good and evil, fighting alongside humanity against the forces of darkness. This belief infused the medieval Persian world with a sense of sacred animation, where the stars were not cold points of light but the shining abodes or markers of these powerful spiritual allies, making the sky a dynamic battlefield and a divine communication network. This worldview provided the philosophical engine for the breathtaking advancements in astronomy that emerged from the great centers of learning like the Marrakech Observatory. For medieval Persian scholars, studying the heavens was not a dispassionate analysis of orbital mechanics. It was a form of communion with the Fravashi of the celestial bodies themselves. They sought to understand the divine will and harness the spiritual energy these guardians represented. The motions of the planets were seen as the visible expression of the Fravashi's actions in the cosmic war, and by predicting these motions with absolute precision, an astronomer could anticipate periods of heightened spiritual activity or conflict, offering prayers and performing rituals at the most potent moments to aid the celestial forces of good. This sacred motivation drove them to refine the astrolabe and create even more complex instruments, viewing each device as a key to deciphering the messages of the guardians. The most stunning embodiment of this fusion is the intricate planispheric astrolabe, a device Persian craftsmen elevated to an art form. In the hands of a medieval Zoroastrian or Islamic scholar, the astrolabe was far more than a calculator. It was a symbolic model of the universe and a conduit for the Fravashis. Its central pin, around which all the plates rotated, was seen as the axis mundi, the connection between the earthly and celestial realms. The reter, the delicate web-like plate that represented the fixed stars and the ecliptic, was interpreted as a map of the Fravashi army, with each star point a marker for a specific guardian's influence. By aligning the reter with the current time and date, the user wasn't just finding the sun's position. They were aligning themselves with the specific configuration of celestial guardians active at that very moment, tuning into their spiritual frequency. This instrumental communion is spectacularly illustrated in the design of the massive mural sextant and other structures at the Marrakech Observatory, founded by the brilliant polymath Nasir al-Din al-Tusi in the 13th century. This was not merely a research facility, it was a temple to celestial wisdom designed to facilitate communication with the macrocosm. The observatory's architecture and its giant instruments were precisely aligned with significant celestial events, particularly the solstices and equinoxes, which held deep Zoroastrian significance. The vernal equinox Nowruz marked the annual descent of the Fravashis, and it is believed the main observational quadrant was aligned to capture the first rays of the sun on that specific morning. By taking measurements at this exact spiritually charged moment, the astronomers believed they could capture data that was not only accurate but also blessed, imbued with the energy of the returning guardians. The act of observation itself became a ritual, a way of bearing witness to and participating in the divine order maintained by the Fravashis, blending meticulous science with profound devotion to create a holistic understanding of humanity's role within a living, breathing, and fiercely protected universe. The final story in our celestial journey brings us to the very heart of the medieval Christian world and the most debated star in history, the Star of Bethlehem. This was not merely a tale from Scripture. For over 1,000 years, it was the ultimate celestial mystery, a divine puzzle that the greatest minds of the age felt compelled to solve using the best science of their time. The Gospel of Matthew describes it simply: a star rising in the east, which the Magi, the wise men from the east, interpreted as a sign of a newborn king of the Jews. It moved ahead of them, the text says, until it came to rest over the place where the child lay. For medieval scholars, this brief account was a scientific and theological challenge of the highest order. What kind of celestial body could possibly behave in such a way, appearing as a sign guiding travelers and then stopping? Their frantic, brilliant, and often contentious search for an answer would ultimately forge a new Christian relationship with the heavens, one that sought to reconcile faith with reason and divine miracle with observable cosmic law. The debate over the star's true nature split medieval academia into fiercely opposed camps, each armed with scriptural interpretation and astronomical evidence. One prominent faction, championed by theologians like Orion and later Saint Augustine, argued that the star could not be a natural celestial body at all. They pointed to its described behavior, guiding the Magi and stopping over a specific house as actions completely contrary to the fixed, predictable motions God had ordained for the stars and planets. This, they declared, was a unique miracle, a specially created angelic being that appeared in the form of a star solely for this divine purpose. To try and find a natural explanation for it was to diminish its miraculous power. However, another formidable group, including intellectual giants like the Venerable Bede and Robert Grosseteste, took a different view. They argued that God, in his infinite wisdom, would have woven this greatest of signs into the very fabric of his creation from the beginning. For them, the challenge was not to dismiss it as a miracle, but to use the tools of astronomy to discover what spectacular, yet natural, event God had orchestrated to mark his son's birth. They believed the star was a real astronomical phenomenon, its guidance of the Magi a matter of divine providence interpreting celestial signs, not a ball of light physically leading them like a lantern. This intellectual battle gave birth to a new and uniquely Christian form of astrology, radically different from the pagan practices the Church often condemned. If God had used a star to announce the Messiah, then the heavens could be a valid source of signs, provided they were read with the right, pious intention. This wasn't about predicting individual fate, it was about understanding divine will and sacred history. The Magi were reinterpreted not as sorcerers, but as pious pagan astronomers, the first scientists, who used their knowledge of the stars to recognize a moment of unparalleled theological significance. Their journey became the model for the Christian scholar, using natural philosophy to illuminate divine truth. This sanctioned the study of the stars for religious ends, leading to the development of natural astrology, which studied correlations between celestial events and earthly phenomena like weather, agriculture, and the rise and fall of kingdoms, all seen as part of God's orderly plan. The most fascinating result of this pursuit was a series of intricate astronomical calculations aimed at pinpointing the exact year of Christ's birth by identifying the celestial event that could have been the star. The most enduring theory, first proposed by the German astronomer Johannes Kepler in the early 17th century but built upon medieval work, was a triple conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn in the constellation Pisces. Medieval scholars had access to planetary tables translated from Arabic and Persian sources that allowed them to calculate past planetary positions. A conjunction where two planets appear very close together in the sky was considered highly significant in astrology. Jupiter was the kingly planet, Saturn was associated with the Jewish people, and Pisces was linked to the lands of the West. A series of 3 such close meetings between these bodies in 7 before Common Era would have been interpreted by learned Magi as a powerful omen, a king of the Jews born in the West. Other medieval calculations pointed to a much rarer and more dazzling event, a conjunction of Jupiter and Venus, the 2 brightest planets, which can merge into a single, spectacular point of light. Some ancient Chinese and Korean records note a brilliant guest star around 5 before Common Era, which some modern astronomers suggest could have been a nova or supernova, a new star appearing where none was before, which would have been a stunning and unmistakable sign. Medieval illuminated manuscripts reveal just how deeply this mystery captivated the imagination. In countless depictions of the Nativity, the Star of Bethlehem is shown not as a simple twinkle, but as a complex, fiery celestial body, often with streaming rays of light pointing directly down onto the Christ child in the manger. In the beautifully detailed Tres Riches Huras du Dr. Berry, the star is painted as a golden comet with a long, sweeping tail, a clear reflection of the contemporary belief that comets were divine messengers heralding great changes in earthly affairs. These artistic choices were not mere decoration, they were visual arguments in the ongoing scholarly debate, favoring a specific astronomical interpretation of the sacred event. The legacy of the Star of Bethlehem is a testament to the medieval mind's relentless drive to find harmony between the book of Scripture and the book of nature. It was a mystery that demanded both faith and reason, a puzzle that encouraged the careful observation of the heavens not as a challenge to God, but as a devout effort to understand the magnificent and intricate ways He chose to communicate with humanity. From the desperate flight of the Norse sun and moon to the precise celestial calendar of the Iroquois Great Bear Hunt, from the divine machinery of the Persian Fravashis to the sacred geography of the Inca's heavenly bridge, we have journeyed through a cosmos alive with meaning. These 30 ancient tales reveal a truth far more profound than mere mythology. They are the bedrock of entire civilizations, a testament to the universal human drive to find our place in the grand scheme of existence. Across continents and cultures, medieval societies did not see a cold, empty void above them. They saw a divine narrative, a classroom, a cathedral, a battlefield, and a compass. They used these stories to predict the seasons, navigate trackless oceans, heal the sick, legitimize kings, and ultimately, to answer the most fundamental questions of life, death, and our purpose within it all. This celestial wisdom was never about escaping the world, but about understanding it more deeply, weaving the rhythm of the stars into the very fabric of daily survival and spiritual yearning. The true magic lies in the stunning diversity of these approaches, all arriving at profound truth using the tools of their time. The Polynesians, with their myth of Maui slowing the sun, developed a mental star compass that enabled them to colonize the largest ocean on Earth. The Dogon, preserving the knowledge of Sirius B without telescopes, encoded their understanding into ritual and art, creating a living library that endured for centuries. The Tibetan monks, viewing the universe as a sacred mountain, built intricate calculators and sand mandalas that were both spiritual devotion and scientific instruments. Each culture looked up at the very same sky and saw a different story, yet each story provided a complete and functional system for living in harmony with the cosmos. This reminds us that there is no single path to knowledge, and that the line between myth and science, between faith and reason, is often far more blurred and far more beautiful than we might think. As our own spacecraft now venture to the very stars our ancestors only dreamed of, these ancient stories lose none of their power. They invite us to look up with that same sense of wonder, to remember that every satellite we launch and every exoplanet we discover is part of a human story that began with someone around a fire, tracing patterns in the heavens and wondering what it all meant. These tales are our shared inheritance, a reminder that our quest for understanding is as old as humanity itself. So the next time you find yourself under a clear night sky, I encourage you to remember these stories. Share them. Tell me in the comments below which of these celestial myths resonated most with you, or perhaps share a favorite sky story from your own heritage. If you've enjoyed this journey through the constellations of history and legend, please subscribe and hit the bell so you won't miss our next exploration into the world's greatest medieval mysteries. Until then, keep looking